Open session of the Western Newbury Board of Selectmen, Monday, August 2020, Select Board. This meeting is being broadcast on local cable TV and recorded for broadcast on the local cable channels and on the internet. The meeting is also accessible by remote participation. It is a Zoom meeting. The direct dial phone number is 646-558-8656. The ID for the meeting is 861-7166-2284. And the passcode to get in is 311105. Chairman Parker is going to be joining us through Zoom. He's at his daughter's wedding in Washington State right now, so that's where he is. We have a few announcements. Angus can maybe put you in a little bit. We're having a town clerk, Steve Marshall. She's starting assistant town clerk. She's starting August 16th.
I'm being told that you should bring your microphone closer, although I see that it is close. So
maybe it's the paper.
That might be it.
And there's also a new town clerk, James Blatchford. He'll be starting on August 30. The temporary town clerk hours in the office are Monday through Thursday, 9 to 1 until August 16th. Thanks at the moment to Dr. Kavanaugh and the interim assistant town clerk Wilma McDonald for helping us get through this time until the new full-time personnel can take over. Anything you want to add on that, Angus?
No, it's been so for instance, things like swearings in, the chief's been in touch with the assistant, acting town clerk, because those are things she can do that Dot isn't sworn in to do. So yeah, it's just for another week, but we should be able to provide full level of service, but we thank people for their understanding on the timing. It's not the full office hours. So.
The summer concert series at the bandstand continues 6:30 to 8:30 this Thursday, and I assume there's a few more Thursdays after that. Town announcements: www.wnewbury.org/subscribe. And another announcement, perhaps Angus could fill us in with a little more details on the public may be aware that there's been some fires at the new high school. I don't have the most up-to-date information, so Angus can fill us in on that.
Okay, there was a fire on Friday, which was obviously very concerning. It appears that it was caused by a spark from a welding that was going on that ignited the roof of a portion of the school that's under construction, or specifically the glue, the adhesive. So
this stuff is very flammable.
It's very flammable. There shouldn't be welding that close to flammable materials. So there is an investigation going on involving the building inspector, Sam Jocelyn, the fire department, the fire marshals involved, the project manager, and the school administration. And they did find some things up on the roof that were, concerning in terms of lack of kind of orderly management of the job sites and materials lying around, that kind of thing. So the investigation is ongoing. There was a second fire over the weekend, which
on Sunday.
Correct, which raises real concern. So I met this morning with Sam and with Chief Dwyer. They were headed over to a meeting later this morning down at the school site. And then I met later today with Brad Dorr, the project architect. It's really nothing to do with the project architect, but he did stop by just to, make sure that, we were aware that he was also concerned, which of course he would be. So the cause of the second fire, and I'll now just read briefly from an update that I got from Sam this afternoon. The cause of the second fire is still undetermined and most likely may remain undetermined. The fire marshals are interviewing the roofers that were on site Saturday. There'll be multiple safety meetings with staff and subcontractors. They're increasing the number of walkthroughs by safety staff, sending additional safety staff to the site to oversee the current staff, and sending an independent fire investigator to review the fires and recommend changes in protocol, and performing site cleanup tomorrow. The site was secured yesterday through the end of the day today to allow the investigators to do their work without any access allowed by contractors or others. So the West Newbury Fire Department, Groveland Fire, and our building inspector will conduct an end of day inspection tomorrow afternoon to check progress, and we'll continue with 1 to 2 additional site visits per week for the purpose of inspecting site conditions until confidence is restored. So there will be a detailed summary of what's gone on at tomorrow night's meeting of the school building committee. And we'll have the project managers, present for that meeting. So, thankfully no one was hurt, but there's definitely some aspects of the incidents that have raised some concern.
Just so, and as you might, so hopefully this will all be covered by insurance. It won't be something that is going to be adding to taxpayer costs.
That is 100% correct. Yeah.
Even
Obviously,
with the deductibles.
That's the contractors are obviously all licensed and insured and bonded, so it's this would not cost the taxpayer, although it could result in some project delay. We don't anticipate that, but you never know. Okay.
Certainly, even a delay of a week or so to investigate this, and eliminate further of these is worth the delay. Okay, our first item of business is 2 items are good. We have a request from Police Chief Duran to hire Jessica, is it Ang? Is that not so correct?
Yes.
As a full-time police officer.
Okay,
Chief.
I'd like to have Jessica appointed as a full-time police officer for the town. She currently works for the Hamilton Police Department as a reserve officer. She did well in all aspects of the hiring process, and shows a great deal of interest in working in the town. She also has a bachelor's degree in criminal justice, and as I stated, has worked in Hamilton for a while.
Wendy, any questions?
Yeah, how long have you been in Hamilton?
A little over a year
And where did you work prior to that? Was it in law enforcement?
now. I work security in Loomis Armored, the armored trucks, carrying money and stuff.
Okay.
And other than that, a retail job in Bed Bath and Beyond.
Do we know if I can't read the number there? Is that
Yeah,
where
that's
it's on the bottom?
Yeah, I'm on the phone, if you can hear me. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble connecting with the computer, so my apologies. I'm gonna try my personal computer.
Rick, any questions for?
No, I don't have any further questions. Thanks, Archie.
I would make a motion to appoint Jessica Ang as a full-time police officer for the town of West Newbury for a term ending June 30th, 2022.
Second.
Second.
Further discussion?
Just to note that that's a standard appointment period of time, and the board annually does basically automatic reappointments. So that the end date is routine. It's not.
It's not specific.
So basically, every June, my office works with the chief and we put together a slate of current officers and dispatchers who are then recommended for reappointment fiscal year. So,
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Parker, aye.
Welcome aboard, Jessica.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
welcome.
So, it's all good with, her being sworn in?
Yep. So the chief's gonna coordinate with Wilma, and yeah, she's gonna come in tomorrow.
Wednesday, I think.
Oh, Wednesday. Okay, because she could come in tomorrow if there's a time that works.
Okay.
So
I'll check with her in the morning.
Okay.
I'm okay tomorrow too.
Okay, I'll let you know by 8:30.
Great.
So how soon will she start?
She's got a commitment with Hamilton, I think, till the 16th.
16.
So probably the beginning of the next week.
Great. Good news.
We need the help.
That's great.
Excited.
Good.
So our next item is, Chief Duran's request for Matthew, Matthew, can you pronounce your name so I don't get it wrong? Whitbo Cabezas, great, as a reserve police officer. Jeff?
Like to have Matthew appointed as a reserve officer for the town. He currently works for the Essex County Sheriff's Department. He's a canine officer. He's also served in the Marine Corps for 7 years, passed all of the hiring process and did well in his interviews.
Any questions from anybody?
Yeah, I have one question. I'm sorry, I didn't catch the name, and I know it's here in the agenda, but any idea of hours of availability? You know, how many hours you might be available on a weekly or monthly basis?
And we had a good discussion about availability, particularly since he's got a full-time job already. He understands what's going to be required of him. He's going to work to come in and get his FTO training done as soon as possible, and then be able to start taking shifts. But that was one of the points that Matthew brought up to me. He works at the Sheriff's Department, as I said, and he understands we need people here that can make a commitment also in town, which he said he'll do.
Okay.
Is the
Thank you.
is the job with the sheriff's office, is that like a routine Monday to Friday, or is that a different type of schedule?
He has a set schedule.
Yes, I have
It's on
a
call.
4-2 schedule.
Okay.
So 4 days on, 2 days off, and it doesn't change, so
Okay.
I know my schedule for the next 2 years.
Oh, wow.
Essentially, so.
Great.
Good.
I move that we appoint Matthew Rico Cabezas as a reserve police officer for the town of West Newbury.
Second. Further discussion? All in favor? Archibald, aye.
Reed, aye.
Parker, aye.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Great.
Matthew. Welcome aboard too.
Thanks to you both. Looks like he just is joining us a second time, so he may be trying something different.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm hang up the phone. Yeah, here, I got onto Zoom finally. Sorry about that.
Great. Yeah, you're coming through just fine now.
Great.
They don't know anything about the internet in Washington.
Yeah, it's a long story. I won't bother to explain it.
Next item. We have two people recommended by the planning board for the associate planning board member, Deb Hamilton and Nancy Keller. My first comment is both of these people have longtime West Newbury background. They both have a lot of strengths in areas that would be helpful to the planning board. To be honest, I was at a complete loss as to which one of these individuals to pick. So that's my comment.
So are we only picking one?
Yeah, under the planning board regs, there's just a single member. That's right.
My only comment is I've been to 3 or 4 planning board meetings in the last couple months and definitely everyone.
Oh, really? Okay.
Wendy, could you say that again, please? I couldn't hear that.
Yeah, I said that I've been to several planning board meetings over the last couple months, and Deb Hamilton has attended each one, even though she's not on the board yet.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, Wendy had, or not Wendy, Leah had said something similar to me that since expressing her interest that Deb had been very proactive about, attending the meetings and really learning about the board's current workload.
Okay, well, that's a useful piece of information. That I was going to actually suggest a coin flip, but
I had Angus and I had a conversation earlier, and Angus noted that there, I'm not sure either for, well, say, assuming that Deb was the candidate that we chose for planning board associate member, that there are a couple of other, significant openings on boards or commissions. Or committees, that is. There's the Conservation Commission has an opening, and also the FinCom has an opening currently. So I'm not sure if Nancy would consider either of those. I mean, they're both, important, and they're short at this point. So I don't think that Nancy's on right now, but it would be interesting to hear her thoughts on that.
Do you know her?
No, I don't, other than, her experience as listed, and it would be, we don't want to turn away willing volunteer and someone with a record of service to the community. And those, as you said, Rick, are both very important openings that we have right now.
Is there a zoning board opening, or
I believe there's an associate, but I would say of the three, that's that would be, pretty far down the list relative to those two. Yeah.
Okay.
And Conservation Commission.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, both a full position on the Concom and the FinCom. So.
Okay. I would make a motion to appoint Deb Hamilton to the associate planning board member.
Second.
With a term to end. How does that work?
It's an annual appointment.
Is it once a year? Okay. Well, you were that, so you know. Okay. With a term to end June 30th, 2022.
Right.
Further discussion?
I would just note that the planning board is kind of put in a tough spot every time by its own regs, because that requires that the planning board bring to this board 2 or more candidates for associate members. So even though there's only one spot, they're compelled to bring multiple options, even if they feel that they have someone they would recommend. So.
So
But the interesting aspect here is in both cases, I think we had, great candidates, two great candidates.
Right. I think it'd be great, yeah, if someone from the board reached out to her and because we really need the help on both of those.
Okay, all those in favor, aye.
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 Great, thank you.
Next item, request from for I guess, is this for informational purposes or?
No,
do you
it's-
Actually have to sign off?
You do actually have to sign off, but it's not really a moving document at this point. Maybe Vanessa, do you want to, and just sit close to the mic so we can hear you. But yeah, it is a requirement in order for a CR to be recorded for the board, the select board in the town in which it's located to approve that. But because of the process that's preceded this with many other parties, including the state and Newburyport and Greenbelt, it's coming to you later in the process than it normally would.
Okay.
Right, so the town is not a party to this conservation restriction, so it's not, a holder of the conservation restriction, but under Massachusetts law, in order for that conservation restriction to be permanent and to be signed by the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, it does need to be approved at the local level as sort of an acknowledgement that it's happening in the community and also an acknowledgement of the public benefit of the conservation restriction. So this is a property that Greenbelt pre-acquired for the city of Newburyport. It's 6 acres that is next to our Indian Hill Reservoir and is an important part of the Indian Hill Reservoir watershed. And the city of Newburyport actively wants to preserve lands within the drinking water supply area. So they are going to purchase this land from us, and then they're going to subsequently grant a conservation restriction back to us on that same parcel. So that's the conservation restriction that's before you this evening to sign.
And so can you just explain why they would do that? I mean, if they're owning it, they're not going to develop it because it's
That's
water
true.
rights.
That is true. I
I'm
think
just curious.
it's sort of a belt and suspenders approach to conserving it. I mean, the belt is that it will be owned for water supply purposes, so it's protected under Article 97 of the Massachusetts Constitution. That can be overturned by 2/3 local votes and 2/3 vote of the state legislature. It's not easy. It is highly unusual for that to be overturned. It would likely not be supported at this local or state level. But us holding a conservation restriction on that's sort of the suspenders.
Okay, thanks.
So,
I had one question about this, just in terms of as the reservoir is under the jurisdiction of Newburyport, but the land and most of the reservoir is in West Newbury. I'm just wondering if this is going to be a strategy and is Newburyport going to buy up more parcels around the reservoir, taking them out of the private domain or out of West Newbury's control? And I'm just playing devil's advocate here, just if this is a potential strategy, which I don't know if I'm thrilled about that.
Archie, hey, Archie, so your comment, going along with that, and Vanessa could probably clarify this somewhat. So but by the way, I think I'm supportive of this in general. So, so I'm not, this isn't like a negative comment, but in the CR, the wording.
Sort of paraphrase what we're just saying.
Oh, it's not coming through.
It's really hard.
Keeps freezing.
Okay, I'm sorry. Maybe I should shut off my video and see if that works better.
No, you're better now, actually. Okay.
Oh, okay. Well, now my video's back on, and hopefully you can hear me. So in the CR, I'll speak slowly and hopefully more clearly. In the CR, there was a provision for allowable uses to be essentially to put a conveyance for water of transfer between reservoirs along this parcel and the length of this parcel. Now, in the meeting that was held in Newburyport about 2 weeks ago, Angus, I know you were there. I believe Wendy was there as well. Newburyport explained a strategy that they have long-term, which to the best of my knowledge has never been discussed with the town of West Newbury, unless it's been with, in a conversation with another board or commission to potentially link their reservoirs so that they don't have all reservoirs necessarily in series. Currently, the reservoirs are all in series, so that if the lower artichoke were to become contaminated, there's no way to draw from the upper reservoir, the Indian Hill Reservoir, or I'm sorry, the
Okay.
Reservoir. And so they have a strategy over some undefined time frame that they would hope to be able to employ, which would be to be able to, essentially establish conduits for water from the Moulton Street Reservoir and or possibly the upper Artichoke Reservoir directly to their treatment facility. And I think that all makes perfect sense, but at some point it needs to be discussed with the town of West Newbury. This, to me, is clearly one of the steps in that strategy. And I think it's important that the city of Newburyport talk about it with the town of West Newbury, because, they're to complete that piping, to access the different reservoirs independently would require significant activity within West Newbury, laying water lines in West Newbury for Newburyport system. And I'm not sure if they envision doing that somehow through eminent domain within our town, where they're doing a taking against West Newbury or what it is. But I think it's important that they talk with us. I also think it's important that we work with them to accommodate it. So, I see this as one element in that process.
That's very useful, Rick. Yeah, okay.
Vanessa, I don't know if you have anything you'd like to say about that or insight. And again, I'm not saying this is a negative. I just think it's important that we have conversation.
Yeah, I think actually, you know more than I do. I wasn't at that meeting. My understanding is that this is a sort of glimmer in their eye right now. They've hired an engineering consultant to take an overall holistic view of the whole water supply system, and I think this is a very tiny piece of that. Our conversations with them have been primarily focused on how to protect the water quality of the waters.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Vanessa. I had another question. Looks like I lost my video. I had another question relative to the specific piece of property. I've walked down the drainage once. It's pretty hard to navigate down, and you can't actually get down close to the stream. The drainage that I mean is the outflow from the Moulton Street Reservoir. And I'm curious how much of the stream that flows as the outflow from the reservoir is on this property, or perhaps most of it's on this property. Do you have any sense for that, Vanessa?
Question. I don't actually know the answer to that. I mean, when I walk on this property, there is a stream that flows through it, and I suppose that could be the primary outflow from Artichoke, but I'm definitely not an expert in the hydrology of the area. There is a stream and a
It seems
wetland.
hard to believe it could come over there. If you think of where the pumping station, the little pumping station, and where that drain is.
Yeah.
That kind of like,
If you
that doesn't seem near this, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, if you look at, I looked at my map.
Does it make sense?
Yeah.
It does, okay.
I don't think.
Yeah, and then I think it flows over to the upper Artichoke over by Roger Street, upstream of Roger Street. Or not, I'm sorry, not Roger Street, but Pikes Bridge Road, upstream of that.
So are there any plans? I know trails are allowed. Do you have any plans to put trails in?
Not at this point because it is so wet.
Yeah.
I think the idea was if there ever was a pipeline, they could probably have to have a cleared strip on top of that. So you'd be impacting the property anyway, so why not
Put it there.
have that be a trail for it?
Oh, I see, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would make a lot of sense.
People want to walk on there.
It's pretty mosquito-y when I was.
Yeah.
This is the standard CR.
It is.
Okay, any further discussion?
I did bring to Vanessa's attention the fact that the draft that was in your packet did have outdated reference to the chair as Archie. And I believe she's prepared an alternate page which has the majority of the board, which would allow, if you approve it, the two who are present tonight to sign, and then she would be able to go forward, because I think you're on a pretty tight timetable.
Yeah, yes, we are, yeah. I think, I mean, we'd like to get this to the Secretary of EDA to sign this week if possible, so.
Okay.
Pretty tight.
So before, seeing as I mentioned, I just located the reference to the raw water transmission line. It's on page 15 of the packet as I guess it's B9 in the conservation restriction. So, you know, it's worth taking a look at some point.
You say 50?
15.
Oh,
Page 15, 115.
Are
It's
you,
referred to as the raw water transmission line.
why did you point that out, Rick?
Just because I mentioned it, that they were talking about a way to get water between reservoirs, and this is that reference that I made. So just so you understand where that reference came from.
Okay.
And I don't point it out as a problem. It's just something for us to be aware of as part of a plan that I think Newburyport is working on, but they haven't yet communicated to us. And it's within our town.
Yeah, I think it is a good idea to meet with them and just talk generally about what their plan is. I don't know how we make that happen. Angus, do we invite them here for a discussion? Or what do you suggest?
We could. I think it's, I don't know how much they're going to share or how much they're going to want to share because they have, I think this was mentioned to me, on a phone call with a city engineer probably about a year ago, probably last summer when we were dealing with the algae bloom. He brought it up kind of like almost informally, like, oh, at some point we might connect all the reservoirs through piping. And so I asked him, are you able to share like what route you're looking at? And he said, well, there's I think 4 or 5 different routes, maybe 3, but there's a few different scenarios that they're looking at. As Vanessa said, they've got a civil engineering firm looking globally at the whole water system. And I think this is one aspect of something they might possibly do. I did ask Wayne to get in touch with John Eric at that time to make sure that there were so I brought up the question of, geez, I hope this isn't a road that we're like planning to pave next year that maybe might get torn up. And I think I was told this would be a long-term effort of the city. So I don't know how much, I do think at the meeting that we went to a couple of weeks ago, didn't they share like a drawing?
Yeah.
So I think that was
Yeah.
the first time they had publicly shared the layout, at least to my knowledge. But I think that, it'd be good to better understand what they're thinking about including on timing. But I think they don't know how they would pay for this. I think it's part of a system-wide master plan, and it doesn't necessarily, carry any implementation behind it.
Yeah. But it all fits into potentially a long-term discussion about regionalization of water. Which there never has been any, as far as I know, any formal discussion about. So possible. Whoa.
So now's a good time to start, right? Rick?
I'm sorry, I got some crazy noise there for a second.
Yeah, so I was just saying now's a good time to start. There's never been a formal discussion, but perhaps we should start now.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah.
So that could be a follow-up to the storm surge presentation, not
Yeah.
necessarily this particular CR, yeah. Okay, so what is the action? So we're just authorizing?
It's also a finding of public benefit. That's an important part of the vote.
And what would you say the public benefit is?
Protection of water quality.
So I move that are we authorizing? We approve the conservation restriction at 117 Indian Hill Road and find public benefit of protection of water quality.
Second. Further discussion? All those in favor, Archibald, aye.
Reed, aye.
Parker, aye.
Sure, yes.
Right now.
No time like the present.
About the water question as well?
No,
No?
no,
Okay.
actually,
That's next.
oh. I don't know, that's not my department. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Vanessa. So once that's recorded, do you send us a copy or do we just get it off the registry?
Either
Or
way,
just,
I'm
yeah,
happy
just
to
give
send
us,
you.
just let us know once it's recorded. We'll
Yeah.
get it that way.
Will do.
Great, thanks.
It'll likely be sometime in September, just because of vacation.
Sure. Good.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for making the trip.
Next item is a request for authorization to install a small parking area at the Boardway Reservation on Turkey Hill Road. This is a smaller greenbelt parcel, kind of in a residential area. I did not get a chance to drive by there today. You have, yeah, so what's the like the siding like?
Well, so right now, there's no
Is
place
there a
to park.
swale or anything or no?
Well, there's kind of a gravel, but you have to park with 2 wheels on the road and 2 wheels in the ground.
Okay.
So it's, and then it's kind of around a bend, so better parking is definitely advantageous.
Yeah, I agree with that, Wendy. I've parked there before and it's not a great spot the way it is right now.
So I wondered whether there was any wetlands there. It doesn't show up on my map, and you didn't mention it in the letter, but you recall, Rick? Is it swale there?
I don't think it is. I bike by there. It's pretty dry on that side of the street.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's pretty flat. In Greenbelts, I thought I recall when I read this that in Dave Rimmer's reference, he said there were no wetlands. That was his perspective, I think, but I think he's right. There was, when I parked there was a mud puddle, but that was because it was, a little bit of a ditch right alongside of the road. An inch deep or 2 inches deep because cars pull off on the shoulder. So I don't think there are any wetlands.
And Wayne suggested increasing the size, right?
I think that, let's see, it's 10 by, so actually, I think it was,
10, it says, yeah.
yeah, but he had
Page
said,
32.
right, he had said 10 by 50, but they had said 15 by 80. So I think he's just saying he would want it to be a minimum of 10 by 50.
Okay.
How long, I'm just thinking, how long is it's not a very, it's just sort of almost like one house, 80.
That seems pretty long. If the
That
car is
seems
15
long,
feet, that's.
yeah.
A standard parking space is
Oh,
10 by
there's a-
20.
So there was a thing here, so the frontage on the road looks like it's about like 250. So it's about 250, it looks like 250 to 275 feet of frontage on Turkey Hill. So if 80 of that would be would be about a third of it, so it isn't encompassing. It isn't encroaching on either of the neighbors.
So the map shows 12 by 50. And it's dated more recently, no, well, July 2021.
Right, but they wanted to go 80, so it wouldn't be significantly longer than that.
I'm just wondering which one they actually want. It says July 30, no, that's page 31.
I would probably take his narrative
Over the
as
map.
yeah, since that's what he's, sending for review.
Where are you?
On page 30, where he's referring to the 15 by 80. I think the map was attached to it. This was actually the first that we'd heard of this. We weren't aware that this was in the works. But it seemed pretty straightforward.
And he doesn't say what material. Whether it's paved or gravel.
Nope.
I would like to know exactly how big they're proposing and what the material is. Do you think it's a problem to delay it?
Not at all.
Okay.
No problem at all. No, and I know Dave would be happy to participate in a meeting.
I would rather go with 50 rather than you too.
Yeah.
Good.
I also wonder why does it be 15 feet deep? Cars, what, maybe 6 feet typically, and it would seem that a 10-foot wide area would be wide enough,
Jeff,
yeah, 10 by
how
50.
large is an average vehicle?
Probably about 6 feet.
6 feet. I'd say a little more than 6, maybe 7, 8.
A typical parking space is going to be anywhere from 9 by 18 to 10 by 20. 10 by 20 is big. A lot of them are, but it's really bigger than you need unless everything's like one of these big, SUV types. But for parallel parking, it's going to be a little wider to allow for, people getting in and out. I think 15 is probably too much, maybe 12.
Okay.
But-
The most cars I've seen there, probably 2 at a time.
Mm.
Anyway, I don't know if that would increase.
I can't imagine that probably that.
No, it's a short route.
Was that Jeff Duran speaking?
Yes.
Hey, Jeff, could you speak towards the microphone, please? I couldn't hear what you were saying.
I'm sorry, Rick. It said just during the day, usually the most vehicles I've seen there is probably only 2 parked there. But I don't know if that would increase more with an official parking site now.
Thanks.
Just ask Dave for more details.
Yeah.
We can discuss it at the next meeting.
Sure.
Sound good?
Yeah,
I would like to know the material.
I mean,
Good.
it's been there for 20 years, isn't it? Yeah.
Good.
Mindy, it does say similar to the road reservation. It's.
But that's not built yet either. That's the one they're current, but that they have to go through some more additional design because there is wetland there. So there's like a plan to refer to. So,
Mhm. Okay.
okay, I'll invite Dave to the next meeting.
Okay, next item is, Chief, are you waiting for another item here?
The age.
Oh, the animal, okay. All right, let's go right to that. Unless anyone has any objection.
So we're skipping.
We're skipping F and G for the moment.
So, there's been quite a lot of discussion about this, I'm sure you've seen. So we had talked last time about increasing patrols there by the animal control officer.
We've done that. The police department's been going through and logging checks. I've gone through myself and also the ACO.
Mhm.
And I spoke with Angus earlier. It was after 11 months of having an unmarked ACO vehicle. Was supposed to get the marked one tomorrow.
Oh, good.
And Kayla does go through the areas. I think if it's a marked vehicle, might help a little more, because people really don't know who it is, and unless she gets out, which she has done.
Has she reported what she sees? I mean, does she see a lot of dogs off leash or in the parking areas?
I saw one off leash at the horse rink last week,
Yeah.
and the owners called and came right over to them.
Mhm.
Most of the ones I see are on leash. I don't know, once they get out into the woods, what happens.
Yeah.
You know, and as far as that bite incident, Kayla did a good investigation into that
Mhm.
and determined the dogs that they thought were involved were not the dogs that the
Yeah.
victim.
Yeah.
So we're gonna continue to check the areas. I'll drive through a couple times a shift.
Mhm.
You know, some days are worse than others, weekends and stuff, but
So with the animal control officer, what can we expect in terms of the number of hours that she would spend?
well, her vehicle is left here, so
Yeah.
every morning she doesn't always left here. But she'll come in, get the vehicle. You know, she doesn't just respond to calls here, she does patrols in town.
Okay.
Oh, she does?
Yes.
Routinely?
Yeah, she's not just coming here if someone calls an issue. You know, she's been very cooperative. If they ask her to step up patrols, she's down Moulton Street a lot, as well as Mill Pond and the horse rink area.
Mhm. So does she actually get out of her car and talk to people?
Yeah,
though?
yeah, I
So
know.
would she issue a ticket, or, I mean, if somebody was not in control of their dog?
I guess it depend on the circumstance,
Yeah.
but I mean, she has not always got the most cooperation from some of the people.
Yeah.
You know, they'll just ignore her, keep walking. You know, most people are pretty good with it.
Mhm.
If it was a problem, you know, she wouldn't write a ticket.
If Jeff, if there was a problem, would she, call back to the station and get, assistance from one of their regular officers?
Yeah, if it was a situation that was that bad, she would, or if she had license plate information from, you know, people that weren't cooperative and drove off, she, you know,
Okay.
we could help her out.
Ray Cook had posted something on that Facebook thread that was enticing, but it may be oversimplifies things, but he was saying, you know, let's say the ACO was at Mill Pond and a dog was off leash and he told the owner, you know, call your dog, and the owner called their dog. Yeah, and if the dog comes over, great. If the dog doesn't, just write a ticket right then and there, just for the fact of demonstrating that the dog is not under the owner's immediate control. Is that oversimplifying it, or is that something that, like, if she was given that direction, because she might wonder, you know, based on the culture of the town, like she might.
How stringent do we want to be?
Right, exactly. But if she's given a clear direction that
I think that's the question that should be answered, you know, black and white, what we want to happen, and it's easier to move forward doing that.
yeah.
Well, I think at a minimum, we need to enforce the bylaw we already have. That's not happening right now.
And I think if 3 tickets were issued, then word would get out.
And part of the problem is there's so many people that actually bring their dogs to town.
Yeah.
I guess there's dog walk sites online. You know,
Well, I know,
And
it's an attraction.
New Hampshire and all over the area. You know, Haverhill. It's a big magnet for dog walkers here.
How clearly are the current bylaws posted? I mean, it strikes me that they're not all that clearly posted.
Well,
And
into Mill Pond is 2 sides.
I guess, you know, the line about, say that again, please.
Driving into Mill Pond, there's 2 signs, right when you pull in, that all dogs must be leashed, but it doesn't really mention anything about voice control.
And the actual mill pond requirements are just, there's specific areas that you have to be leached, not the entire property,
right.
so it's very inconsistent.
So like I said, if we can clarify what the town wants, a little more black and white, and then we can look at enforcement
Mhm.
after we get some clarification. But like I said, she is in there a lot, she's active, she does stop and talk with people,
Mhm.
so.
So.
Yeah, at the last meeting, we talked about possibly having slightly different rules for different areas. And I don't know if that's going to go anywhere, but there was the possibility of requiring dogs to be on leash at all times immediately around the parking area or parking areas. And it seems to me that we need to be pretty specific about the rules and make it clear depending upon where you are.
I thought we did, we were gonna get some signage, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, those are the rules currently, Rick. But
Yeah,
that they're well understood by users, even the Mill Pond Committee wasn't completely clear on what the requirements were.
right. Yeah, so I would be among those for whom it's not completely clear what we've actually, what the real rules are right now, so.
Yeah. So, I mean, there was some discussion about making different areas, maybe, pedestrian only, but I think until we get the enforcement of what we have nailed down, it doesn't make sense to try to change the rules. I think we need to try to enforce what we have now.
And we could have Kayla come in and, tell you what she's run into, in different areas. Issues that she might see.
I think that would be really
That's a
helpful.
good idea. Why don't we, before we, make a decision, do that. Yeah, that's good.
Could we do that on the 30th? Thanks.
If she's available, yeah,
I'll check with her tomorrow, I'll let you know.
sure, that'd be
We can
great.
have her early, so we don't have to be,
Yeah. Yeah, so she can give us specifics about, what her experience is there and any input she has about in terms of how to enforce.
Okay.
And then maybe in the meantime, we need to get the Mill Pond management plan and, identify.
I think they were gonna mention that at the next meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that everybody needs to get on the same page,
Right.
but, not different rules for different areas.
No, you're right.
It's too convoluted.
Yeah.
I guess my only question, Jeff, so since this, has there been any changes to, I guess we could ask her, how is people's behavior and their dogs worse or better, or how?
Well, I guess if the vehicle's not marked, people don't really know that.
Yeah, sometimes they don't know who's talking to it until she gets out with her uniform.
Right.
So I think, like I said, that would probably help when they visually see an animal control in the area on a daily basis, so.
Yeah.
That's good.
So in terms of her, how is the contract worked out? Is it a certain number of hours per week she's in West Newbury?
No,
or is it as needed?
Just as needed.
Okay, so I think that with some of the comments on Facebook, there's a perception that we're paying more than we're getting in terms of service, which
No,
I don't think
she
is.
does a good job. She has the whole city, part of Plum Island.
Yeah,
She has a big area to cover and a lot of work to do.
so that's not part of the contract, the number of hours per week we
No.
get. Okay,
No, some of the, when that agreement came up for renewal, there was some negotiation on what was the appropriate cost share, and we were looking at different metrics, including land area, linear mile of road, number of like documented animals per town. We were looking at different, like what's the right proportion. We ended up with roughly a 70-30 split between West Newbury and Newburyport. But it was, I know myself and the board did, we looked at it, we tried to come up with the best estimate that we could, but it wasn't an exact science, and there isn't anything in the agreement that.
We probably have more codes.
Well, I know we have a ton more barns when barn inspections were going on before COVID.
Right,
Takes up a
and
lot of time.
yeah, and those are requirements that we have to do annually and that she does on our behalf and are sent to the state.
Okay. So is there anything we need to do prior to August 30th? Should we invite the Pond committee? I don't think they're meeting again.
Yeah, we can let them know it'll be on the topic, on the agenda for discussion for sure.
I'll talk to Kayla and, let her know what kind of information.
So
you guys
if
are looking
we,
for.
if the select board made some kind of decision, well, they have to go along with it anyway, right? So,
Yeah, I think if we're gonna make a change in policy, we need to get more public input.
but Mill Pond ultimately has for that particular part of it, they have it's their jurisdiction, not ours.
Are you referring to the management plan?
Yeah, in other words, if we're, I'm just throwing something out, we decided that, people can only have 2 dogs or whatever we decided, after a hearing from the animal control officer, it's sort of academic because they have to go along with it.
Well, so I think what you're referring to, so this is the Mill Pond Management Plan here up on the, and for actually, hold on, Rick, let me do a screen share so you can see what I'm referring to here. So the Mill Pond Management Plan refers to the dogs must be under control at all times, either leashed or under voice control, and this is what specifies the physical restraint. Dogs must be leashed in all parking areas and roadways and in designated areas. So the method to amend the Mill Pond Management Plan does require a number of parties to be involved. The select board is one of those parties, but the select board does not have the authority to change this unilaterally.
Right.
Right, but if you go back to the first paragraph, if people followed that,
Yep.
then we wouldn't have an issue. So that's why I feel like the enforcement piece is what we need to focus on. Dogs are not allowed to approach other visitors unless invited.
And unfortunately.
I know, the thing is, when we don't have 100.
Oh, of course, but I'm
100
saying
hours
we
a
don't,
week,
we don't
yeah,
need to change the plan, because
Right.
we have what we need
No,
in the plan.
You're right. If we could-
Is that the dog walking use, is that,
We have no problems, yeah.
Go ahead, Rick.
yeah, is that entire paragraph, paragraph 2, is that posted anywhere at Mill Pond? Most people are not going to read it, but I don't think we can fairly assume that anybody walking into or arriving at Mill Pond with their dog is going to be familiar with that. And it seems to me as though part of the signage should include, we don't necessarily need to refer to section C, paragraph 9 and section F, paragraph 6, but we should show everything that's relevant somewhere at Mill Pond if we don't currently.
Part of the problem, Rick, is the 2 signs when you immediately pull in, pretty cut and dry, all dogs must be leashed.
And that nobody knows who posted those. So.
So then you get in further and you might have another sign that,
Right.
they can be off leash if they do A, B, and C. Or
Yeah,
Yeah,
we need to just figure something out a little
Yeah.
more clear.
right. And then have, clear and consistent signage.
yeah, when I went to the Mill Pond Committee meeting, when we just discussed this, and they were gonna post this in one of their boards with the glass, one of their boards by the
By the
parking.
parking area,
Yeah.
yeah.
But there does need to be consistent signage throughout the property, and perhaps this could be on the Open Space Committee website, or we can send out an email blast. Because it's just not clearly known, I think, by most people.
Yeah, but even if it's on the website, Wendy, it seems to me that, a lot well, I don't know what a lot of people do, but I assume that some people hear through word of mouth that there's a place they can take the dogs to walk to in West Newbury, and this is how you get to. And they arrive there with their dogs and they have no idea what the rules are. And so they hop out of their car with their dog, or they hop out of the car, open the door by the dog hops out, runs off, and then they're on their merry way. And they've never taken the time or had the opportunity to read easily visible.
But the other issue is the second part of the first sentence is that under voice control. Because people say, oh, my dog is perfectly controlled. People that they think their dog is completely controlled and it's not. And that's the gray area that with it like that, unless, the suggestion that Ray Cook made is actually quite spot on, because
Right.
prove it's voice control, otherwise it's not. Because everyone says, you know how people are, oh, my dog is so friendly, never hurts anybody. That's what, everybody says that.
But if you're somebody that's afraid of dogs, then it's not.
I know, I that's exactly it, yeah.
We need Chief Inspector Clouseau to be there.
Well, the Mill Pond discussed having like volunteers go out and patrol the trails and, so I
Oh,
think,
did they? Oh,
yeah.
oh.
just as, an education to try to get people, because, worst case, they lose the ability to have dogs, which nobody wants. So there's some incentive for them to try to help make this work. So does this put a burden on the police force, or can the animal control officer?
Well, I
Take
mean, it's
care.
part of our job. I mean, I can't have the officers parking the cruiser, walking out
Right.
into the woods for obvious reasons.
Right, but taking the dry out of the
Taking,
food is not a big
yeah,
deal.
we patrol those areas anyways.
Yeah.
We said we've stepped it up in the past few weeks, but
Mhm,
we've always been in and out of those areas.
mhm. And then one in the fall, there'll be cross-country races there, so there'll be huge groups of people running. So. All right, well, I think that's a good plan.
Yeah.
Officer come in and discuss further.
She can really give us an insight, but, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Chief.
Okay, item F, correspondence. from-
We do have, I know we have Nancy Powell, and she may be delighted to hear all of the proceedings,
Oh,
but I do
okay.
know that she's here for a specific item, which is item I.
Oh, okay.
So,
I'd
Rick, do you
probably
want
give
to kick this one off?
Yeah, I'll give a quick background, then Nancy will probably have more to add. So back, I guess it was late last spring, the members of the Climate Change Resiliency Committee, actually, that may have been prior to it becoming a committee when it was the MVP group, joined in a site walk along River Road, or more like a drive to various spots. And a fellow by the name of Jeff Wilson, who is a colleague that Nancy Powell has worked with, or somebody who's worked with Nancy as a contractor, actually, I guess, went with us and viewed erosion areas along River Road, and showed us some of the erosion indicators. And, we speculated somewhat upon why certain things were happening along River Road relative to erosion from the Merrimack River, and sometimes from water flowing into the Merrimack River from the land above. So, based on that, Nancy, why don't you add whatever you think is relevant, please?
Yeah, sure. I guess just to back up a little, the committee, once the MVP plan was approved and we were eligible to apply for grants last year, we had started thinking about, some grant opportunities. And the top one that rose through that whole process was River Road and concerns about both erosion, where it seems like, the river is eroding right basically up adjacent to the roadbed, as well as there's concerns from various members and I guess people from River Road about flooding that has occurred and inaccessibility in the future. So we had invited Jeff Wilson out because he's just a very creative, nature-based solutions kind of guy. And that's what he's been working with me on the estuary Plum Island portion of, the salt marshes, addressing some of the big issues that we're having there, to see if we can kind of put in for a grant, to see if there's anything we can do proactively to make sure that we don't get to a point where we have just bad choices, one bad choices versus another, that we still have time, but maybe there's things we can do proactively. So that's what that was. And, we decided to delay the grant for a year because we felt like this was an issue that we wanted more input on, and we didn't have the time to kind of get all the input and put the grant together. And so there were some discussions from the people that did attend that meeting, and Wendy and Rick were both on that meeting that day, that people would benefit from doing that sidewalk from Jeff, because I think a lot of us were very surprised by the things he said, and it seemed very insightful and hopeful. So yeah, that was the idea, was that we would try to schedule another site visit with Jeff, with whoever the select board thought would be good to attend that meeting, just to understand the issues and understand what we might be thinking about for the grant related to River Road.
So following on what Nancy said, the question is, who do we think would be appropriate people to be on that site walk? Because it would be a site walk, I think it would be open to pretty much anybody, but we probably don't want 100 people. Don't want to encourage 100 people to be there, but certainly DPW should be represented, the select board should be represented, the Climate Change Resiliency Committee should be represented, maybe Concom, River Road residents. So there are a lot of potentially a lot of stakeholders in understanding, what risks there are along River Road.
So you're looking at September for a date?
Yeah, sometime in September. And Nancy, I'm guessing you probably haven't asked Jeff yet because we really haven't gotten that far along in the conversation, but it would, in large part or in a major part would be dependent upon Jeff Wilson's availability.
Yeah, I have a tentative. I told him about this, and he said he's more than willing to do this. Yeah, so it would be his availability. And I know, like, with the projects we have going on in the Marsh side, like, it's time dependent. So like earlier in the month probably doesn't work for him. So mid to late September might work better for him. So if someone want to propose some dates, I can ask. And I think it would be more effective to try to limit the number of people on this walk, because there's just parking issues. I think I know at work we're actually back to, we slid back, so we're masked again, indoors and out, and like we're limiting numbers. So given that, and that we probably, most people might not be in the same vehicles, and we might be caught, pooling, or caravanning, and there's limited parking. It would be good to limit the number of people. But the committee did talk about separate outreach to residents, and specifically, doing a survey to ask them what their concerns are and documenting like the number of times it's flooded or, areas of problem spots for erosion that they're concerned about. So kind of starting the conversation by asking them about what they're concerned about, and then potentially trying to recruit some local high school or college students to actually do those interviews that has had training in doing those kind of things.
So that would be a separate thing than the boards and committees or whoever the town wants to.
Yeah, we thought that given the number of people that might be interested, it would be good to have a separate effort. And that could, we can do it in advance of the grant, or we can do it as actually part of the grant, because I know that they really love, the grants typically love that community engagement aspect of it. So we can start it ahead of time and then really like what Newburyport and Newbury is doing with Plum Island right now. Like they actually have a contractor that's been hired to try to communicate with residents about sea level rise issues. So kind of similar kind of thing where we could actually write that into the grant and have some professionals helping us rather than volunteer committees trying to do this.
So the purpose of the sidewalk then is to just kind of generate board and committee interest in the grant, and the issue, of course.
Yeah, I guess my understanding was if there was any concerns about us applying for this grant, or if there was any questions about what might be involved in the grant, it's better to talk about it on site while we're looking at the issues on site.
Yeah, it struck me as important background information for people who are making decisions or involved in any actions long term, to have an early baseline understanding of the nature of the problem. Most people I don't think understand at all that there are issues along River Road or potential issues along River Road, and so at least from my view, it was important that the people involved in those decisions or future actions, get an early look at what we're thinking about.
Okay.
Rick, I don't know if you're on email today, but we got that email today regarding the upcoming grant round. Is that something that, or actually was that Green Communities? That wasn't MVP.
That was Green Communities, actually. Yeah, that's unrelated. Yeah.
So what timeline are you thinking for a grant application?
Let me see. I think, Nancy, was it February that we would have had to put the application in this year? It was.
Yeah, it was like a February and March timeline. So when they put it out in a pre-application, and they want us to kind of submit pre-proposals and get it vetted, and we did do that. And I think the select board talked about it last year when we were doing the pre-proposal stage. Yep. And the state seemed to really like our proposal. They thought it was very unique and different than what they are getting from the other towns, and they were very excited about our proposal. And then we had some further discussions, and I think, a couple of people thought that, rather than the resiliency committee working on this seems like a bigger community-based issue, and we should just be more inclusive in the grant development process and make sure that we have sufficient input. I guess, when you talk about, anytime you talk about climate issues and erosion and road access, there could be people that are concerned about where it might be going. So we wanted to make sure that it was a very inclusive process and people had time to ask their questions before we submit the grant. But, and to clarify that this grant is a feasibility study, like we're not committing to anything. It's just to see if there is a nature-based solution that would, solve some of the problems that we are seeing now and will probably get worse, 10, 20 years down the line. Is there anything we could do now to be more proactive? Because right now it's not really that big of a problem, but it could become a problem in the future.
Okay, Nancy, the only thing I would add to that is that I don't think we should assume anything about time frame. I mean, if you look across the river at where a section of the road along the river in Merrimack was closed, was it maybe 12 years ago? I don't think the town of Merrimack realized what was about to happen. And we had a big storm, there was big erosion, the road began to collapse, they closed it. They permanently closed it, they abandoned it, they gave the property away, and it's now will never again be a road. And, so it seems to me as though we shouldn't assume that we don't have an imminent problem. We shouldn't assume that we do either, but we need to recognize that this could become a problem much more rapidly than we expect.
One question I have on and this all sounds really good to me, very important for sure. On the feasibility study and the reference to potential nature-based solutions, would that be solely what the grant would look at, or would it be looking at, and I assume by nature-based solutions, I don't know, if you're referring to plantings or things that could shore up the shoreline or like natural cribbing or what kinds of things, but as opposed to like kind of bricks and mortar solutions, or would that be part of the scope, or would that be beyond the scope?
It could be a mix, actually. It could be a hybrid based on the proposal that we had from, oh boy, I'm drawing a blank now, Nancy, the name of the engineering company that one of the people lives in West Newbury. I'm drawing a blank on the company name.
Yeah, I'm forgetting the name too. They're big.
Yeah, but,
They're big
but they're a large, engineering geotechnical company, and they would look at nature-based solutions, but also on potential hard solutions and hybrid type solutions that integrate both hard and nature-based solutions.
Yeah. So GEI is the.
GEI, thanks. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So I think that's actually another reason, Angus, to be more inclusive and do this site visit, because what we can write the scope of the feasibility and the funding for the contracts, how we want to approach it. Like when we did the site visit with Jeff initially, we were thinking erosion from the riverside is the issue, and maybe living shorelines or something, could be like, or something similar to address the erosion from the riverside from wave action. When we actually did the site visit from Jeff, he was pointing out all these areas where upland runoff from the upland portion was actually undermining the road, and that there was a lot of drainage issues that was maybe contributing to the erosion that we're seeing on the riverside. So, just kind of, so we can so right now we're looking at a hybrid between GEI and like what Jeff can do, which is, looking at basically drainage and past land use and how do we put things, functionally back. We never, it's hard to put things back the way they were, but how do we fix things functionally so that they don't get worse? And we talked about we might not do a culvert assessment throughout the town, but maybe as part of River Road, or we can add other areas in town like Ash Road Crossing. Like if there's issues where we think culverts are causing problems, that could be something that like GEI is very good at doing, and they can provide that information. So knowing how, which issues we want to include in the grant and how we want to approach it will help us develop the budget and the scope, and the contractors, the right contractors we think we want to work with, for the actual grant.
Sounds good. So maybe the next step is to draft an email/invitation and identify, what board members you want to have. I mean, we spoke of DPW, Concom. I think maybe the planning board should be invited as well for looking at land use issues. Anybody else?
I think it would be good to have some representation of River Road residents or property owners. And, we don't want, I don't think we can accommodate everybody, but it seems as though we should at least reach out to people who are immediately adjacent or own frontage where we recognize existing issues.
That seems contradictory what you were saying earlier. That there was going to be like a separate resident part, resident outreach part.
Well, I mean, Nancy, I'm not sure what your thoughts are here, but I think if we're going to be going onto people's frontage, their river frontage, where they own property, and with a group of people, space areas we've already identified, that they should be aware of what we're doing.
That's correct, yeah.
And in broader terms, kind of outreach to River Road residents in general, as Nancy mentioned. But I think for an initial walk or an initial look, that we should have people who are more immediately affected, and in fact whose property we would be going on, to be aware of what's going on.
So how do we identify those people?
I can send the list. There was a couple of areas we looked at that, we might want to access private property. For the most part, we stayed on the road. But there were a couple, and there's a couple of landowners we really want to engage on, even at the feasibility portion, where we feel like they are going to be key to any solutions. So I can send that to Rick or Angus, and we can decide how best to reach out to those folks.
I did talk to Nancy late last week, and I said, yeah, I really like the idea, by the way, of the survey. I don't know about the timing or whether that's sooner or later, but I think that the type of open-ended questions that she described of, what concerns you, or what's the history of flooding, or asking people these questions, I think is great, for whenever the time is right. But I did tell her that our assessing department can run labels for that kind of thing really easily, that writing the letter, collecting survey, assembling results is one thing, but the actual mailing is a snap. And so, whenever that time is right to do that outreach, the assessing department can run those labels really quickly and, do a mail merge or just a generic letter.
Another advantage of reaching out to people who either live on River Road or in close proximity to it is, I know people who walk River Road every single day, and they've been watching things happen and probably puzzling over them, not really understanding what was going on, but they could potentially be a really valuable asset in terms of information, information looking backward, what have they seen change? Because it might indicate what might be going forward.
Yeah, I guess my thought is that we've talked about two different purposes. One is to get buy-in from town department personnel that are going to be, potentially impacted by the work, and then the other is to engage residents. And I'm wondering whether if we try to do both in one sidewalk, it might become too unwieldy.
Yeah, Wendy, maybe, I'm sorry if I wasn't clear. For the initial sidewalk, it would be, my thought would be that it would be primarily town department or committee or board related.
Yeah.
And people whose properties specifically, we would be looking at the frontage, the river frontage of. And, but for an initial site walk, I don't think it's practical to try to reach out to River Road residents in general.
Good.
Yeah, my advice would be, figure out that short list of people or entities that you absolutely need to be there. For instance, the DPW director. I mean, he'd have to be there. Jeff Wilson has to be there. Figure out those 4 people, figure a date and time that works for them, and then just announce it. Because, just putting these things together, like for that Coffin Street, if you try to, it could take weeks to pin it down. So my advice would be figure out that short list, get their schedules together, probably on a Saturday or something, and just pick a date and put it out there. And obviously it's public. Once you have a quorum of any board or committee there, it's automatically public. And if more people show up, so be it. But it sounds like there's a core of people that would get the most immediate benefit out of this.
So Nancy, what do you need from us, or are you all set?
I guess if you guys are good, I can coordinate with Wayne and Jeff to pick days that work for them, and then let me know if there's additional people you want us to schedule around. And as Angus says, then we'll have the date, and Angus or someone else can decide who to invite to the sidewalk. I'll also send, I think there's really one landowner we really want to reach out to. Unfortunately, he's not a local resident. He's a farmer that is not a local resident. So I don't know how strong his ties are to this community, but we really do want to connect with him.
Yeah, I think he actually, if I recall correctly, Nancy, I think he lives in Danvers or something, right?
Yeah, somewhere in that area.
Yeah.
I wonder if Jocelyn would be another good person with the floodplain.
Oh, yeah. Our director of inspectional services, our building inspector, Sam Jocelyn, I think he'd be happy to be part of it. And Wendy just, made the point, since he administers the town's floodplain bylaw. And actually he worked at, I don't know, Nancy, if you ever came across Sam, but he was in Newbury for many years before he joined us. And I know spent a lot of time on Plum Islands and is really familiar with some of the challenges of, development in coastal zones.
Yeah, no, that sounds like a great addition. So yeah, if you feel like he's important, I can, if you want me to try to schedule a time that works for the key folks, if you want to add him to that, just let me know and send me the email.
Okay.
Great. Thanks, Nancy.
Good.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, okay, I guess I'm handing this off to you. 'Cause
Okay.
I couldn't understand it.
Okay. All right. So item F, there's going to be a meeting this Wednesday at 5 p.m. down at Pentucket, and each of the 3 Pentucket towns has been asked to send its kind of primary administrator, as well as a rep from both the select board and the FinCom. And so I've accepted the invitation. I'll be there, whoever else is or is not there. Anyone's welcome. If although we can't have a quorum now because actually we're past the 48 hours. But the topic is back in the last winter, early spring during the budget season. You may recall that Pentucket had asked for authorization to use so-called ESSER 2 funds, which is, basically similar to the CARES Act. It's kind of coronavirus funding, but that was targeted towards schools. And there's a certain amount of funding that was made available to all schools, including Pentucket. They wanted authorization last winter to allocate some of those ESSER funds toward each town's contribution to the school budget, basically having the effect of reducing the town's assessment for the current FY22 budget cycle. And we were told at the time that this did not come into play in West Newbury because of the 3-town funding formula. Our assessment increase, not including the middle high school, was actually pretty modest this year. It was higher in some of the other communities, partly because they've seen more growth than we have. So all 3 towns consented to this. It was, at the time, it was very important to Pentucket and to Groveland and Merrimack because the use of these ESSER funds had the effect of bringing the FY22 budget below a threshold that did not need an override for the operating budget, because some of the scenarios Pentucket School Committee had been looking at would have required an operating budget override. So all 3 towns consented to use of the funds. Subsequent to that, sometime over the summer, the state budget was passed and included language that prohibited the use of ESSER 2 funds in order to reduce a community's minimum education contribution, which, as you know, under Chapter 70, there's a certain minimum contribution. And I'm told that in both Merrimack and Groveland, the ESSER 2 funds were used in a way that reduced both of those towns' minimum contribution to the budget below the level that is now allowed. So basically, Pentucket has a couple of options, none of which are easy, but because they now know that they can't use the ESSER 2 funds in the way that they had intended to, I believe one of 3 things needs to happen. Either Merrimack and Groveland will need to absorb an increase in the operating budget, which would require them to either make cuts elsewhere in their non-school budget in order to bring their overall budget below, the Prop 2.5 limit, or propose overrides to their respective, communities to support the operating budget at the new increased level, which is obviously, got challenges. Or third, if both towns decline to do this, Pentucket School Committee may have no choice but to reduce its current year operating budget.
Can they do that already with the school year already started?
I don't think they would have suggested it if they couldn't. I think they don't want to. I know they don't want to do that. I talked to Greg LeBrac.
I've never heard that as an option after the year has started.
Yeah, no, this is not where they want to be. I can tell you that. But I think any of those 3 options are problematic. I have been told, as you see from the materials in the packet, there is not a scenario where West Newbury's contribution would go up. And that's just because of the 3-town formula and how it works this year. But West Newbury's primary, in addition to,
So what's our skin?
So our skin on the game is if we were to go to the meeting Wednesday and it was starting to feel like the other 2 towns were not going to agree to an increase in their assessment, which as you know, if any two of the three towns approve the budget, the third town has to live with it.
Right.
So if those two towns were not going to increase the school budget, and therefore were intending to force Pentucket's hands to reduce their current year budget, which would have the effect of cuts and presumably increased class sizes or those kinds of effects that come when you cut school budgets, West Newbury and its residents would then presumably be very concerned about that. So
And that we would have no recourse.
uh,
Two of the towns would.
no legal recourse. Yeah, I think it becomes then political so I think that's how it's been described to me. I did reach out to Rick, not to Rick, to Greg LeBrecq since getting his email to make sure I understood it, because we never really did get anything detailed on the whole ESSER 2 funds. That's why I included some of the background from last winter. And I remember at the time asking for a little more information, and we were not given much information at all. So what you have in front of you is basically what we know about it. So yeah, I think it's an important meeting Wednesday at 5.
Are other towns in Massachusetts or in a similar situation?
They
Does it
must be.
change? Okay.
Yeah. I know, Greg.
The budget just got passed last week.
Yeah, Greg made reference to it affecting other communities or other communities having made similar assumptions.
Yeah.
And as you see in the email thread, there's a school committee meeting coming up on the 17th, just a week from tomorrow. And so it was important to get this meeting scheduled for before that.
The state is drowning in COVID money, and the legislature won't sign off on spending a penny on it. It's kind of irresponsible. This is the legislature's doing.
I know that's how Greg views it.
So are you able to go?
Yeah, I can go 5.
Five.
I'll make an effort to. So I only have to go. I can buzz over there quick.
Okay.
I'll go in my scrubs. That'll scare them.
All right.
Yeah, go, Archie, go with the drill in your hand.
Yeah. Little blood on there, okay.
I guess this is interesting. This is, if it is in fact the legislature that's not pulling through here, this is, maybe this is a point for us to speak with our legislators.
No, I'm sure that our particular legislator voted in the opposite direction. But
Yeah.
okay, that's.
Yeah, so that,
very- So
could
how
turn
much
into-
money? I guess the other question is how much money we're talking about.
There's over $200,000 for each community.
Oh, yeah, okay, so it looks like back in February, he was talking about numbers on the order of 250,000 in Groveland and 218,000 in Merrimack,
So 500,000 total.
like
That's a
470. Yeah.
lot of money.
It is a lot of money.
What's the total budget?
35 or something million, so it's 3%.
That's a bunch of classes. It's a bunch of teachers.
Yeah.
5 positions maybe, or 8 positions, you could say. Okay. Item G is the town and the town of Merrimack are looking at possibly hiring a shared conservation agent, so the respective boards have been evaluating an agreement to bring this to fruition. And we want to get this going so that we can get the hiring process for the Shared Conservation Act agent up and running. So the board has looked at the proposed agreement. We've made a few small changes to it, but we're in principle okay going forward with it. The big sticking point is the Merrimack's agreement on the number of hours and the wage rate that they would be willing to offer the shared conservation agent. So that's something that is not, that's sort of in flux at the moment. So I think we've want to phrase what we were gonna say.
So we voted to approve the intermunicipal agreement on principle, contingent on resolution of the hour and wage.
That's good, yeah, okay. That's good,
We need a formal motion again.
yeah.
Yeah, I think it should be made in open session.
That's my motion.
Second, further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Archibald, aye.
Reed, aye.
Parker,
All right, and as the board knows, the Merrimack Select Board is also meeting tonight. So we'll, hopefully have an agreement in principle, and we can proceed with shortlisting candidates for interview, ideally for a shared position. I think it's, if we can get this done, it would be a win-win for both communities. I have no doubt of that.
I think it can be a model for other towns as well. I've received some inquiries about it.
Mhm.
It's been posted jointly on the NBCC website.
Great.
So under,
Okay,
okay. So I just drafted this email and talked with Angus about the bullet points for personnel issues that we want to address, personal policy issues. So just looking if you had any comments on that.
we're on item J now?
Correct.
page 48.
Okay.
And I think the idea had been to send this to those boards and commissions that have a role in, appointing or overseeing staff, as opposed to all committees. Is that right?
I mean, is there any harm to sending it to all boards and committees?
Well, I would just be
I don't
concerned
think
if,
we need the historical commission or something.
yeah, I mean, if you have, I think the key is to get those core groups to the table. And so I wouldn't want to dilute either the meeting itself or the prospect of getting a meeting. I think it's important that those, namely the, Water Commission, Planning Board, the Concom, the Board of Health, and the library trustees, I think are
I think that's good.
yeah.
Sounds good.
Obviously, it's a public meeting, anyone can attend, but I think that, I think unless we could get all of those groups together, that's really the critical mass that we need.
What about the board of assessors?
Uh,
I mean, technically they fall under that.
well, except they're not the appointing authority.
CPC.
Well, there was, but it wasn't, it was, I mean, they'd be welcome, but and I think it worked out very well with the hiring of the chief assessor. But there was never a question, including by the board, as to who was the appointing authority. That's always, going back to the decade, many years ago, that was always, the assessor was always under the appointing authority of the finance director. So that's something that didn't change with the Town Manager Act. But I do think on some of the other, there were issues of job descriptions.
Yeah.
That was, that would be good.
I think
Yep.
any board or commission that has staff.
Yep.
is
Yeah,
great.
that's good. But I would say, for instance, like Council on Aging, there's a director who supports the Council on Aging, but does not, from a personnel standpoint, does not report to that. And that's been clear for years. And so we don't want to do anything that calls anything into question about that, because that position reports to the town manager and supports the council and goes to their meetings and does all of that. But from a kind of personnel oversight, there's never been any question about that.
So you both fine?
I'm good.
Rick, any comments on the,
No, I'm good. I think it's great, Wendy.
okay,
Thanks.
all right, Angus, so, want to send me the list and then I'll send this from the. select board?
Sure. Yeah. It's great.
Okay, our next item is.
Oh, actually, before we move, so just to be clear, so is the idea to have this on a regular agenda or a standalone meeting?
I thought we talked about standalone.
I agree. I just wanted to make sure we were
Yeah.
clear on that before we
Yeah,
moved on.
so I think we set the
So
date,
this was
right?
the,
Yeah, September
this is the
1st.
day after a regular meeting, right?
I think it's the Wednesday, right?
Or the 2 days after.
2 days after, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it is 2 days after. That's right.
Is that date set in stone?
No, that's just
No.
what we threw out.
Okay, I'm available. My only concern is, where I'm gonna be out next week. And then I'm gonna be out the 26th and 27th for my dad's service.
Yeah.
I have this week and I basically only have a few work days, like 3 work days other than this week. Anyhow, we can do it. It's just, I don't know how much time I'm gonna, and there's some other things on
So
personnel.
Well,
On the off.
is there any downside to that sliding for a few days?
Yeah, I feel like, it might, it's a big meeting. I want to make sure we're well prepared and I just,
So September 8th, maybe? I don't think there's any other boards or committees that are meeting on the second Wednesday of the month.
that would work for me.
Wednesday, the 8th. The only downside to that is that I'm on both the Energy and Sustainability Committee and the Climate Change Resilience Committee, and they both meet the second Wednesday of the month. They're the sequential meetings.
Yeah.
Is there a reason, I mean, could we do a Thursday night? I guess I wasn't sure if there was a reason why we chose Wednesday night in particular.
We thought that there would be the least conflict with the boards that we wanted to invite.
Rick, are you thinking Thursday the 9th?
Yeah, that'd be a possibility for my, I don't know if there's a reason not to do that. I don't know what it would be, but sure. I mean, that's.
I think CPC is the third Thursday.
Correct.
So, yeah, I think that should work.
It's open for me.
Okay, great. What time were we going to shoot for?
7?
Works for me.
So we just want to make it clear that, so. We want to have probably the chairperson,
Yeah,
rather,
That's what it
we don't
says.
want to have like 4 members.
No, I
from
just
each
said
thing.
one person. We're asking the chair of each board or committee.
Yeah.
And if they can't attend, then have somebody. in
Yeah.
their place.
Good.
Okay. Did you hear back from Tracy, Rick?
I did not. No, I just checked my email a minute ago just to see if by any chance something had come in, but no, I haven't heard back from Tracy
Okay.
or from anybody else. I also copied the administrator's assistant and who also I think reports to the board, to the select board and the chair of the select board, and I haven't heard back from any of them. Bob Snow from Rowley did mention that he'd had a conversation with one of the board members in Newbury who thought it sounded fine, but that was, one individual that he'd spoken with.
So because it seems like with him already, he is the chairman, that sounds like a good position to be negotiating from. I don't know why we would necessarily want to change that.
Yeah, I think maybe, my takeaway from the conversation I had with him and, combined with Gerard Witten's letter is that we probably need to establish more of a dialogue with Bob Snow. And, he offered to come to one of our meetings, which sounds great. The only downside is that I think their meeting schedule is identical to ours. And so, if we wanted to meet with him as a board, we'd probably have to schedule a special session.
What do you think, Rick, about, I think you and I talked about maybe inviting him to more of like a daytime to actually show him around some of the projects, give him a little tour of what our kind of short list is of projects. That might be a more low key way to just establish a relationship rather than him feel like he's like facing the Inquisition.
Sure, yeah, no, that's not a bad idea.
No,
And I have no idea what his date schedule is like.
See the sidewalks by the lack of sidewalks by the Page School and how impossible walking there and stuff is. That would be great.
Yeah, so I was planning to reach out, and I guess obviously we need to talk about this, but I was planning to reach out to Tony, what's his last name?
Komornik.
Yeah, Komornik, just to get his take, and this was at Bob's recommendation, to get his take on tip funds and, what the history is and how communities go about engaging with tip funds or, enabling themselves to receive them. So I thought that was worth have a conversation. Maybe there'll be a takeaway, maybe not. And also, if I'm able to, when I get back there, back in West Newbury, the day after I get back, or that I'm tentatively going to be back, there is a meeting, noon meeting of that particular committee, the MVPC, was it MV? Boy, I can't recall the whole acronym now, but I was going to sit in on their meeting if I can that day, just to hear their perspective on and hear the way things work, to see if we can understand how we might be able to better leverage our membership to be included in consideration for tip funding.
Sounds great.
Yeah. So did we
have a deadline to
actually
get
have
back?
to like?
Yeah. So we do have a deadline. It's this. Well, oddly, it's the 15th, which is on Sunday. So I think that was a misprint. I don't think the deadline is really on Sunday. This coming Sunday. But yeah, we're supposed to have a jointly signed letter with the other two communities. Based on what Bob Snow told me, it has been discussed by the town of Rowley, because we've heard nothing back yet from Newbury. I don't know where things stand there, if they've talked about it. It's possible it's on their meeting.
Probably I mean, like, we didn't know about it for years, so they probably don't either, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Just being realistic, I mean, hopefully, maybe I can try giving a phone call tomorrow. Again, I did, I spoke with their town clerk. But everybody else was on vacation. And so I'm assuming that Tracy and their, the administrative and select board assistant returned today, although I don't know that for a fact. I was just assuming that they were both out for a week when I called and learned they were out last week. But if they came back to, a week or perhaps more, if they were gone 2 weeks worth of emails, I can see how this wouldn't have been the number one email they responded to. So I guess I'm hopeful to hear something back from them. So I guess we're in agreement, or I'm assuming that we're in agreement that it's fine to go forward with the current sub-region rep of Bob Snow from Rowley.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Yeah,
So should we just do our letter? I mean, we don't have to be the one that corrals Newbury, do we?
I guess not, but by default, I don't know what happens if they don't have. Again, none of us recall having heard of it.
we're not Newbury's keeper, that's their issue.
Yeah, no, that's right. But on the other hand, we do want this to go forward, so it's in our interest to try to make sure they hold up their end.
And if they had an objection to the current representative, then we would want to know that, right?
Yeah, exactly. We'd want to know that.
Yeah. So is it just a letter we have to send, or is there actually a form?
Well, it says no, there was no form. It says a jointly formed letter. So,
Okay.
if we had a letter that just says, we could draft up the rough form and then figure out how to put it. I don't know, Angus, is that, I know there's limited bandwidth. Does somebody have time to?
One sentence.
Well, do we have a prior letter? Was there a letter?
No, there's never been a letter. No, my theory on this is you've got a new director up there who's trying to.
Since my time as a selectman.
Yeah, no, it's.
Well, Bob's been doing it for 15 years.
Exactly. So, I mean, in my opinion, an email saying the board discussed this, the board, was in agreement with Bob Snow continuing to serve. Please let us know if you need anything further. I mean, I promise you that will be sufficient.
Yeah.
Okay, then let's run with that.
Okay.
So is that something you can do? Or
Yeah.
I still think it's.
Or if he really needs a jointly signed letter, he could send us the format.
Yeah.
Right. I do like the idea of engaging Newbury on this. So
Yeah.
we can hear back from them.
Yeah,
Let us know.
right. I agree with you, Wendy. Yeah, I mean, we the more we engage with the communities that are with our neighbors, the better. The more productive things will be long run.
And then, so you're gonna try to work out a field trip for Bob?
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll reach back out to him and see when he might be able to do that.
All right, great.
Yeah, and I think, I know that's something Wayne would be happy to be part of and would be a good tour guide for that.
Yeah, great.
It's really the three projects, because I think the one thing with the tip is you need to remind yourself this is federal. So to rise to that level, it really has to be, of legitimate regional interest. And so that's why we've consistently prioritized 3 projects. And I think of the 3, I think 2 are good tip projects. The third, I do think is a long shot that we would ever get any federal funding for, which is that one with the 3 roads with the boulder.
Yeah.
Roads. But the feds aren't going to fund that ever.
So along the lines of sort of regional considerations, Newburyport has not shown clear enthusiasm for spending money on the bridge, and I have no idea what their other thoughts are on application of TIP funds. But does it make sense for us to speak with somebody in Newburyport to see if they would be an ally in requesting TIP funds for the bridge?
Sure. Yeah, we'd ask the mayor that. I think if the funding comes from elsewhere, I think they'd be
They're
delighted.
not gonna be unhappy.
No.
Right.
But
And-
it comes to them prioritizing, that bridge
Something
in
that
their
they-
tip
that
requests. I think that's a different.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I meant. But
Oh, well,
in general, I think, TIP funds, the more regional things are, the more there's collaboration between communities, the more likely they are to be weighted heavily or more heavily weighted. So if we could get Newburyport on board, then,
yeah, I mean, it's definitely, when you read the tip and when you read the amount of projects and the cost of those projects compared to the actual funding that's allocated, and you look at some of these projects in especially in some of the cities in our region, there's such a mismatch between monies and need. So I think, Newburyport's always going to prioritize, just like we're doing, what are its top 2 or 3 or 4 projects. And, Middle Street Bridge just isn't on their short list, obviously. I don't think they'd oppose it, but there's just the universe of projects is so huge. No, I mean, the universe of projects is so huge. It's tough to get attention on the tip.
Yeah.
I've seen it happen, but I've seen it happen for 1 million square foot developments, like those kinds of things. But there's no harm in asking. Yeah, I talked to the mayor, at that event a couple of weeks ago, and she kind of laughed. She said, "Oh, are you still talking to me?" Because she knew, obviously, but we deal with them on a bunch of different things, and it's not personal. It's, it's if we had her list of capital needs, we might, where you stand depends on where you sit, as they say. So anyway.
So Angus, do you want to speak with the mayor, or?
I'll talk to her. I don't know if it's, I guess what I could find out from her is what role her office has in making those requests to the TIP, or for projects additions to the TIP, and whether that's her, whether that's, the Department of Public Services. They may do that without, it might not even go through the mayor's office. It might be a staff prioritization. But one of the big questions I do have related to all of this is, with this new federal infrastructure bill, will there be a requirement for a project to be on the TIP in order to be eligible for those infrastructure funds? Because if so, getting on the TIP would be a much, much higher priority. Because the actual funds through the TIP, it may never happen, but there are grant funds that if you have to be on the TIP to be eligible, we would want to know that.
And how would we find that out?
Well, I think there's not even a bill yet.
Rules haven't even been.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's something they did put in for the ARPA money. Was it ARPA or ARA? Whatever the one, with the 2009.
Yeah.
ARA, I think.
It was ARA, yeah, American.
Yeah, you definitely needed to be on the TIP to be eligible for that, and that was a big, and a lot of people didn't like it because it didn't allow those funds to be as nimble to respond to like the current needs, because it takes years to get on the TIP.
Yeah, but if we were able to get that project on the TIP with the engineering all done.
Yeah, I think with the bridge we could. When I was in Marshfield, we were doing a major highway project, and I was always told, in order to even be considered to be added to the tip, you had to be at a 25% level of engineering. And so we did a lot of work with this highway project to get it to that level so we could then compete to get on the tip. So something like the bridge, we're there. Something like sidewalks, near Page School, we're not there. We don't have any engineer. We don't have a basis of cost estimates.
Perhaps.
So with the permitting still going on, Angus, is there an estimate, or do you know if there's a reasonably accurate estimate as to percentage of engineering work done? I know it's pretty high, but because
It'd be
there's
above
still-
75% for sure.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
I think it goes, in terms of DOT, it goes 25, 75, 100%. It's not like a finer grain than that.
Yeah, okay. Thanks.
Okay, how do we want to handle item L? It's a lot going on there.
This is all background. I certainly did not intend for tonight for you to go into detail on things like floodplain and stormwater. I think, for what would be great guidance tonight is if there's any that you want to definitely see go forward, or any that you want to invite in the sponsors. I know, Sam or Wayne or Leah or any, whoever you want, we can invite to a future meeting if there's something you want to drill down on. Basically, there's 2 meetings between now and the warrant closing, including the night the warrant closes. So that's kind of your window to determine what you want to include on the warrant.
I did check with the Conservation Commission, and they are planning to bring the wetlands bylaw.
Okay, would there be any change from the one that was
Yeah.
submitted in the spring? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So that might be a good.
Is that something that, when do you know if that was anything that they were planning to present to, or that they wanted to present to the select board beforehand?
I would hope so, because since there was discussion about it last time, and maybe we need to invite them instead of waiting for the meeting that it's due and then having questions.
Also, for instance, one of the adjustments that we're making and that we'll need to make with the, with Mike McCarron's retirement is over the last many years, legal review of proposed bylaw amendments has been a matter of course, because it's just, he's in-house, he's reviewed everything. That's just part of the value he's brought. In other towns, it's very, very typical. I mean, it would be very unusual to bring a bylaw change to the town meeting that had not been reviewed by legal. So I did go ahead and send the draft floodplain bylaw and the draft stormwater bylaw over to KP last week. That's part of, Leah and I have been corresponding with them about just more fully integrating the land use council. And so the land use council, Robin is going to attend the August 17th planning board meeting as kind of a oh, you know what? Actually, they pushed that back because of the mass housing. They didn't want to double book. So it'll be at their next meeting after that. I think it's actually September 7th. But anyhow, the point is I sent those 2 bylaws off to KP to start their review process. And so I would do the same with wetlands once we have a proposal, but I didn't do that with the draft because I didn't know if it would change.
So I'll reach back out to them and let them know that we want to have, you want to have the legal review before?
There's no hard and fast rules. It's the board's warrant. It's a matter of, I think if they have a draft that they think is pretty far along and there's just some nits, I think it's better to get the review process started. If they'd rather wait till it's totally buttoned down from their standpoint, they can do that, but then it will be a matter of, is this board, you can always, once you put it on the warrant, you can always take it off right up until when you actually sign it. So there is some more time there. You just can't add anything new on after it closes.
Well, in terms of bylaws that,
having spoken with Angus a little bit about it, the stormwater, the stormwater bylaw is something that we have to do but there's a lot of, there's still a lot of moving parts there, and like, who's gonna do it, and how's it gonna be enforced, and these are not trivial issues, and it's sort of like, we don't, there's no one that's going to come tell us what to do on this. There isn't someone, there's no constituency for the stormwater bylaw, but yet we have to come up with the answers for this. So to me, this is a tough one. So we have to think a little bit about this, and Angus, would you say that this is a, like, absolutely has to be done this year thing?
Yes, and it's supposed to be done.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so basically, you know, it's a 5-year permit. We, the town of West Newbury, are the permit holder with the EPA, with the DEP being the kind of administering agent, but it is an EPA federal permit. You know, we're held to it. There are conditions on that permit. And in each of the 5 years, there are things that have to be delivered. And the adoption of a stormwater bylaw, you know, under our permit was supposed to have happened by June 30th. When Wayne and I are working on the annual report, which is due the end of September, we will document the meetings that we had, the discussions that we had in the year of the permit to show that progress was made. But we need to say that, you know, we need to say when it's going to happen. I think just an open-ended, we're working on it isn't going to cut it.
yeah, so with the consultant that helped draft it, did they give us any, you know, inklings of what similar sized communities, how they address those kind of issues in terms of who runs it, that kind of thing, or is it all over the place?
It's kind of all over the place. MVPC helped us with it, Jen Hughes, and in some towns it's, you know, it's Concom, it's planning board. There's somewhere it's the select board is permit granting authority. In at least one, I think it was more of an urban community, but you know, it's actually the DPW director was the permit granting authority. So it can run a wide gamut. I'm sure they have like a summary that I can get that would be helpful to have, like, at a glance of where that authority rests in different towns.
Yeah, that would help.
But I don't think that is going to answer our question, because it comes down to capacity and ideally what's going to be kind of, you know, ideally kind of aligned with existing responsibilities.
The other thing is to not trivialize the impact that this will have on somebody who's actually trying to get the thing done. And so if it can be, if they're, you know, doing things within the regulations, then we shouldn't add 10 more hoops that they have to jump through. That it should be more, you know, we should make it so that whoever is getting on the permits, if the people are doing things correctly, then it should be in line with the other permits that they have to get to. We shouldn't make it something that adds an additional 3 months of permitting. I guess that's what I'm driving at. Yeah,
I agree with you, and I think that's better for everybody. I think it's you mentioned the applicant. Obviously, it's better for the applicant, but it's also, I believe, better for both staff, because there's some efficiency that comes from handling multiple permits related to the same project. But also, I think for abutters, it's better to not have, you know, hearings spread out with all these
Oh,
different
that's-
entities.
I
Like
didn't think of
if,
that.
so for
That's
instance,
important.
in Marshfield, we had a very strong water resource protection district, special permit for any development within that. And, as the town planner, I administered that, and very often with a development, we may be sending a butter notices, that there's a subdivision review, and on the same date, we're going to open a public hearing for a water resource protection district special permit. It was not unusual. In fact, it was rare in Marshfield and Westford to have any development that needed anything less than 2 permits, and often 3, before the planning board. So the planning board would open the hearings concurrently, and then they would stage the hearings depending on different
Your
topics.
point about a butter is not having to go to three separate meetings is a good one too, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's got to be more efficient overall for everybody to, to have, to not spread it over more boards or departments, so if it's something, say, that Wayne is not currently involved with, he shouldn't be dragged into it. If there's a project that he currently would have no involvement with and not have to spend time on, but some other board or commission was already up to speed on, then it makes sense for those who are already up to speed on it to deal with it.
I think the other thing we want to decide is, and the other big question is, do we want this to just be the district, or do we want it to be town-wide? I can think of, I'm sort of torn in two different directions. We limit the number, we have fewer applications, things to be reviewed if it's just the district, and that saves everybody work. But it's sort of inconsistent if there's 2 sets of rules for 2 parts of the town. So that's creates a little confusion. So I sort of, what did the consultants think about that? Did they mention that at all?
They did, yeah. As you saw from the memo, that was one of about 4 kind of main decisions that needed to be made.
I know, but what was their thinking?
So I think, so I can tell you the staff working group felt that just having it apply within the so-called urbanized area made the most sense for a couple of reasons. For one thing, because it will be a new permit, that would give us some time to work out the bugs on a smaller geographic scale.
Okay.
And get a better sense of how the standards are implemented and enforced. It would be less permitting activity, which would be better from a workload standpoint. But the other thing that I think we need to remind ourselves with this is that these stormwater phase 2 regs are nationwide. They apply across the country. And so there's many parts of the country that are far, far, far less regulated than Massachusetts. So it'd be one thing if our existing framework, regulatory framework, we weren't looking at stormwater, but we are looking at stormwater. Massachusetts has had DEP stormwater regs since '96. Relative to Louisiana or Kansas, where they take a much more hands-off approach to development. So the EPA felt the need to kind of have a very top-down, like you have to look at X, Y, and Z. Here in Massachusetts, we've been looking at stormwater in a serious way for decades, and we get, stormwater calcs and all of that. So I feel like it's not like areas outside the urbanized area are being ignored. They're still being vetted. So that's where I think, we feel like there's some amount of, it's kind of aligning to some extent what we already do to the EPA framework. It's not like it's a new thing for instance, the planning board to look at stormwater. They do that. I think this will make it better and make what they do, better, but it's not a new thing.
So I guess, along those lines, you had said, in the near term, or actually I inserted it in the near term, because it's a new regulation, that doing it over a smaller scale would be a good thing. But would we somehow apply that at a later date to the balance of town? Or would the thought be that we do it over the smaller urban, well, our developed core, can't really call it an urban core, but our smaller developed core, and never address the rest of town, or add that at a later date? And then the other question was, should there, if we do decide either now or at a later date to extend it to the balance of town, should there be a threshold? I think it might have been in a conversation we had earlier, Angus, that you mentioned, maybe, is it the MEPR permitting? There's a set of thresholds for other projects that require, is it MEPA? Is that the?
No. I think it was probably the 1 acre of disturbance.
Okay.
Then that's definitely in the EPA. Some towns have set a lower threshold of ½ acre, even less. But the MEPA, or I'm sorry, the MS4 is 1 acre of disturbance.
I think Mike McCarron was talking about MEPA in relation to that.
Okay, that's right. Yeah, you're right, Wendy. It was Mike who said that. Yeah.
So I guess, Rick, it's up to, it's up to the legislative body, town meeting, and it's up to you as the board of what you want to bring to town meeting. So you could bring to town meeting just within the urbanized area. You could say you want it townwide. You could say you want the urbanized area, and then if it, after a year or two, if it doesn't end up being a big deal and seems to be going smoothly, you could expand it at that time. But there's nothing automatic about it that would require you, initiating that in the future.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll use an example, and the example is, it has to be followed with a mea culpa. I built a house 26 years ago, and we built a driveway, and never at that point in time, there was no regulation on how we built the driveway, and I'm sure we caused problems with eroded material, for a single house lot. And there was really no regulation of what we were doing. If that could still be done now, it's not right, and it wasn't right then. But that's what happened. So that was my bad 26 years ago. But we don't want that to allow that to happen going forward forever. So if we don't regulate the whole town now, at some point in the future, if we don't not regulate the town now, but if we don't control that issue now, then we should have some point in the future in our sights for where we do try to eliminate or mitigate stormwater problems from smaller development, single lot developments.
I don't think there'd be any, if this board, felt that you wanted to do townwide, I don't think there'd be any real heartburn about that. It is one we, at a staff level, we looked at it, and and I think the only thing that's going on really with all of this is just hesitancy on workload, because I think, as I said a couple of minutes ago about kind of aligning with other responsibilities, it does make sense in a lot of ways that the planning board would administer this, because a lot of development that hits that threshold is going to be in front of them anyway. My only hesitation on that is I know, very well that there's really significant concerns about workload in that department. And so for that reason alone.
But somebody has to do it.
I know.
This is not something we can't do.
Exactly.
Not do.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Was there any rough thinking on how many projects would this actually affect a year?
There was. Leah and Sam worked together on an analysis looking back a number of years on, and it's hard to know because we don't measure acres disturbed, all we knew was like the acre, just because it's an acre lot, unless someone's disturbing the whole lot, that's not going to meet the threshold. But
Right.
Sam did do an analysis with Leah of that, and this was 6 months ago, so I don't remember, but I can definitely have that for the next packet
I mean,
of the estimated number.
if it turns out that there's only like
It's only a handful.
5 things
It's
a
not,
year,
it's not a lot.
it
Yeah.
may not be a big workload.
No, I don't think it's a big number. It's just, as we've talked about before, if your cup is full to the brim,
Yeah, I
one
know.
drip makes it overflow. And that's some of the signals I'm getting from staff. So. But I don't think it's a large number of permits. I mean, you figure on average, we've issued about 14 single-family house permits per year on average over the last 10 years.
And so.
There's not.
The footprint of a house is not an acre.
No,
And unless.
it'd be a rare
They
instance.
have
It
like
could
a-
happen, but like Rick described with his own, with a
My
long,
driveway.
long
is
driveway.
insane too.
yeah. So I mean, there would be a rare instance where it would trip that threshold, but many single-family houses would not. So you're really talking about a subdivision or an open space residential
already
development,
being
which are already in front of the planning board.
Gotcha, okay, that's good information, yeah.
I like the idea of doing it consistently across town,
Mhm.
but if you can find out.
Yeah, I do have that. The work was done. It just, so yeah, I can definitely find that out.
But Wendy, I don't know if we'll ever know like how big someone's driveway was, that will,
It's unlikely it's more than an acre.
like if you have a 2-acre lot, half of it isn't gonna be.
Right.
If you have a 5-acre lot, and
So,
there were lots of exceptions for things like if you're repairing your existing driveway and things like that were grandfathered in, yeah.
Right. So, I mean, how do you foresee this happening, these decisions getting made? Angus? When, I mean, there's not even like a board or committee that's in charge of this.
Right. Right.
That's why I'm like talking about it.
Yeah.
So when, how are we gonna make a decision?
Well, as you can see, we've invited input. The input I've gotten, so far is pretty cursory.
Yeah.
I do know that the planning board has had it on their agenda, and knowing them, they will get me something much more substantive because they always do.
I know the
But
Conservation Commission discussed it and you haven't received anything from them.
no, not yet. And, for instance, like I know Health put it on an agenda, but it was shortly after getting this and they hadn't had a lot of time to process it. So I got some comments, from Blake just as an individual member saying it all looked good to him, but he didn't respond to the question of where the permit granting authority should rest. But I also know they've got it on their agenda for tomorrow afternoon. So, the boards are talking about it.
Okay.
But so far, no one's answered the question of, no one stepped up and said,
We want to do it.
right, which we didn't expect they would, but that's the question. And I think townwide does make some logical sense. And, I don't think there'd be any concern about that.
Have you ever seen a Board of Health in charge of the stormwater?
I haven't personally, but that doesn't mean it hasn't happened. And the Board of Health is the enforcing authority for the illicit discharge detection elimination, so that they do have a role in stormwater management. And I think there is more capacity there.
Yeah, it's our own
To it.
full-time.
Yeah, they're the only one that has on the list that has a full-time director. So I think there is more capacity in that office.
That's interesting.
And
Huh. Okay. Yeah, I hadn't thought about the Board of Health involvement with it, but yeah. Huh.
Yeah, so I heard back from Blake. I personally did look over the bylaw. Everything looks fine with me. It seems like most of this would pertain to the downtown area, seeing a lot of our streets don't have underground drainage. But I think that maybe missed the point. And then Jane sent me a note last week saying that this would be on the agenda for tomorrow.
Angus, we're going to meet with the water board shortly. Do you think they will talk about the water main at that point? Or?
Yeah, they're working on getting a specific cost proposal. For those are the two, the church and Prospect are the kind of the next ones on the list that they want to prioritize. So they're working on, they've invited a cost proposal from Tate and Howard to do the engineering for those. So that'll be a separate article that they'll definitely sponsor for the fall.
So the engineering is
No, the engineering is
one?
No. The construction costs are orders of magnitude $1 million. So typically engineering could be 10 to 15% of it. It's a sizable number.
But not insane. Okay.
No.
Okay.
Okay, so that could be if the estimate is, yeah, combined cost estimate $1 million for the main replacement. So that's saying the engineering might be in the range of 100 to 150. If it's 10 to 15%, might be 100 to 150,000 or something more based on how much over $1 million the mains replacement was.
Yeah, I do know those main numbers, are just a per linear foot.
Yeah.
Extrapolated cost. It's not so yeah, they're working up a much more detailed estimate. And
so perhaps if this got funded at fall town meeting, could the engineers get cracking on it soon? And in other words, perhaps this might be something that will be, if the federal infrastructure funding thing goes through. It still hasn't yet, but if it had, I mean, I don't know how long the engineering itself would take to get organized so that it would be, a so-called shovel-ready project too, also. That would be really nice, but so. Maybe that's a question they could ask before they meet with before we meet with them. They could ask Tata and Howard, okay, if we got the money for this, how long would the engineering actually take?
As you may recall, I talked to Mike Goutet in the spring about, I knew they were on track to underspend FY21 monies by 20 or 30,000. I had hoped we could get that engineering started before the end of June to encumber those monies and put that money but Tate and Howard said that they didn't want to begin the work until we could sign an agreement for the full amount, because it would have been difficult to carve out, because they can't go forward without a signed authorization to proceed. So they would have had to carve out like a sub scope for 20 or 30,000. And until the fiscal year end, we don't know exactly how much we have. So anyhow, I was hoping we could kind of save 3 or 4 months and get them at least started, but it didn't work out that way. So,
but find out if it's a 2-year process or a 3-month process.
Yeah, that'll be.
This shouldn't be too bad.
No.
Putting a couple of mains in on a couple of streets, it shouldn't take.
I don't think it would, but what do I know? I'm not an engineer, so that's. But I agree with you, Archie. It should be pretty straightforward.
Well, there's probably survey work that has to be done, just at the very up front.
Yep.
Before they can do anything else. And yeah, so I'm guessing that it's going to be more than 3 months because, you need to generate that data before you can do the engineering.
Yeah, I mean, we just, I know they're working with Mike on getting, we just put a contract in place last month for the rehab of the water tank from the fund, the project that was funded at the Maytown meeting. So that's probably also part of why it didn't get started, is they were focused on getting that project
Okay.
on track for this future projects. It's just,
Any other ones that people want to talk about?
what's your thought on the addressing bylaw? It is housekeeping, but at the same time, it seems like it's really well conceived. I don't think it'd be controversial, but it's more of a philosophical, do you want to put something like that in the fall or just kick it to the spring? I don't think Sam would object, but I know, I think it's totally up to you. And I mean, honestly, if it was my vote, I'd probably say delay it because it's just extra pages of formatting in a FinCom booklet. And
I'm not sure I
Sort of
understand.
going-
Just extra pages format. I mean.
well, that I personally do that work, Rick. So it's just
I see. Okay.
like that's me sitting there doing that work.
Okay.
There's no one else who does that work. So, saving even 2 hours of work between now and October is a
I did have one question about this. So is this saying we're going to I-95, they changed all the exit numbers. Are we gonna go down Main Street and say, we don't like this one being 513 anymore, it's now gonna be 514, or is this just, I wasn't clear if there was gonna be corrections made after this was done, or is this just addressing for new houses going forward, or does it apply retroactively? Your house really isn't at 638, it's actually more like 614. I don't know. Did anyone get that feeling? In which case I would be against it. All the chaos that ensues with that.
Oh, I think that's a good reason to not have it on the phone.
Yeah, if we have questions about what it's about the details, maybe it does make sense to just defer until next spring, and at some point between now and January, ask Sam to come on in and explain it.
I'm sure he has the answer. I'm sure he'd be happy to come in before. It's just the amount of, we don't have a lot of time. So
Yeah.
I'd be totally content. And you can see, I kind of planted the seed for that to tell him, might be to the spring, and he's fine. It's just, it was ready. So he sent it.
Yeah,
But
it.
I would bet that it's not, it's only
I
going
see
forward is
people,
I cannot
someone
imagine.
that has to have their address changed and
Yeah, no one
every
wants to
single
do that.
thing they have, they
This would
own.
be-
Yeah, and Archie,
That's a major project.
yeah, no, I can't imagine that address will change, but I have no objection just to not doing it now and instead
Good.
planning to do it at a later date. Does anybody else have a different thought?
No, I think that's a good outcome. Yeah.
So the mooring study is gonna be for CPC next week.
It'll be before CPC next week. I met with Brad Tour, stopped in today to talk about, the fires. We did talk a little bit about the mooring study. And I think his thought is if it looks like it's smooth sailing, so to speak, he's in favor of keeping it on track. But he said if it starts to look like it's going to be a lot of questions and a lot of process, he has a very full plate himself. And I think he would probably be the first one to back off the timeline if it starts to go sideways.
Okay.
How much?
Not necessarily in
20,000 or something like that.
25, yeah, something like that. I do have Wayne putting together a report for the next meeting on the Emerald Ash
Oh, good.
borer issues. He's got an enormous amount of information in his head, so he's going to put together a memo for the next packet. It's a really tough issue. But I told him, you know, if the town, I'd rather the town decide not to do anything than just never really consider it. And then a couple of years pass and everyone says, hey, why did we let this happen? But you can be prepared that the price tag to do anything meaningful would be well into the hundreds of thousands of dollars.
And it would also be an ongoing expense.
Correct.
So,
Like,
yeah.
yeah, I did that, see, like, that's what I'm concerned about, okay? It's not a one-time fix.
No.
No, it's not a one and done. It's, yeah, it's definitely not a one and done.
But he's putting together a memo
Okay.
on that.
You know, in the noise bylaw, I don't think we're ready to do anything.
I don't think we are either, so I'll go ahead and strike that. And
I didn't hear.
the noise bylaw.
Okay. I
And-
couldn't hear it was too noisy.
And then it doesn't sound like we're going in a direction of amendments to the animal bylaw at this point. Is that a fair?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think we need to figure out the enforcement piece. before we
Yeah.
change
We
it.
gotta
Okay.
try what we got first, yeah.
And I don't think we have time. I mean,
No, I don't think we do. No.
Oh, and
Yeah.
animal, any kind of rules.
The last thing on there, the funding for next phase of town offices HVAC work. Angus, the reason why Lori Timmerman sent that email that you know, you were copied on was she and I had a conversation a week or so ago, you know, and I explained to her that we needed to hear back from the contractor, you know, B2Q, with an update of their previous proposal, as well as some other work they may propose at the library. And, you know, had explained that there was a time frame that we had to hear back within if we were going to apply for funds at the special town meeting. So, you know, I'm hoping that in the next week or so that we'll hear back from B2Q. Wayne has had a conversation with them, and you know, they know that they need to, you know, to talk with Wayne about that. I'm not sure why we haven't heard back from them yet, other than that they probably have a lot on their plate finishing up other projects that, you know, from earlier. So, but they do know now, both from conversations I've had with them, from conversation with Wayne, and from conversations with Lori Timmerman, that we need something fairly quickly.
Okay.
So is there any further information on the Groveland? dog park?
No, I did, you know, Nathan had described to me, you know, in a conversation, what his thoughts were. I did send him a note about a week ago to see if he could send me any backup. And, you know, I told him that it's not like a deadline, but just anything he could share. I didn't hear from him, but he could be vacationing or something. So I'm sure we'll hear from him soon, but you know his basic idea.
Right, I just didn't know if this is gonna be like a citizen's petition or what he's envisioning.
Do you know, Rick, has Nathan told you, is he intending a citizen petition? That would be 100 signatures. That'd be a lot.
Yeah, well, he had put that out as a possibility, but I haven't heard anything back from him, and I haven't had a chance to reach out. So I don't know anything more.
Okay.
And, you know, he may be, now that he understands that West Newbury needs to receive something definitive in return, you know, a definitive benefit in return, he may very well be trying to figure out what that would be and how to negotiate that with Groveland, because essentially that has to be offered as part of the agreement with Groveland. Isn't that right?
Right. That was my understanding of Mike's advice, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So Groveland has to be part of the conversation too. For all we know, this might be on their select board agenda tonight, if they're meeting tonight, to figure out can they offer something to make it, for West Newbury to be a participant?
Archie suggested dog biscuits.
You have to show your driver's license to the West Newbury
You're
resident.
talking about offering, and I'm just picturing Groveland as a dog biscuit.
All right, moving on.
Okay, okay, Angus is gonna do his 5-minute town manager update.
Wait,
Okay.
what about the personnel policy?
I'm sorry.
Oh, good. Yeah. So item M. So there are two things I would recommend that the board consider. So as you know, in order to propose an amendment to the personnel policy, it needs to be advertised for staff input at no less than 10 days ahead of when the board would vote on the change. And so one change that the board's talked about back in June is referring to the August 30th meeting is whether to add Juneteenth as a recognized holiday under the personnel policy. So if the board is comfortable doing so, I'd suggest that you refer that question to your next meeting on August 30th. And my office would then send something around and post so all staff are aware that that would be considered. And then you would take up that question on the 30th. A separate topic, which I don't have a specific proposal for you, but I would recommend that you put out a call for staff input, and then on the 30th, hear whatever input comes in, and then you can make a decision that night or at a subsequent meeting whether to propose a specific change or not, is regarding the method of compensation for qualified part-time employees for holiday pay. Which has been a question over a number of years as to fairness, as to consistency, as well as to administrative complexity. So I think it would benefit the board to hear the different thoughts on what's good, what's not good about that policy, and then based on that input, you can decide if there's a change you want to propose or not. And me and my office can put together some more backup on that, so you have a clear sense of what the issues are on that. It's section 7.3 of the personnel policy. So I guess those are two separate things.
So do we need to make a motion?
I would think so, yeah. Certainly on the first one, to
Yeah,
refer
the
to
first one,
hearing,
definitely.
or not to hearing, but to
Yeah.
refer to the next meeting, a proposal.
So that it can be put up, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so a move that we discuss, that we take that up at our next meeting, the observance of Juneteenth as a recognized holiday at the next meeting on August 30th.
Second,
Further discussion? All in favor?
aye.
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 And then what's the language for the?
I don't think you need to be as formal, because this one but I think basically the idea is to put out a call for staff input
Comments, yeah.
on any comments regarding section 7.3 of which is to do with holiday pay for qualified part-time employees. And that would be an agenda item on the 30th.
And so
Great.
you can file.
Down.
back and-
Yep.
So Angus, you would maybe, because it's from your initiative, so.
Yeah, I started a
Give us
memo.
Recommendation of what you think would be better.
Yeah, I did start a memo. I just didn't get it far enough for
Yeah,
tonight, but
yeah.
you'll have the backup in front of you and a proposal. You'll have what it used to be, what it is now. And, we'll give some more thought in my office to how, whether there might be a way to meet the spirit of the current language in a way that's maybe administratively
Is it
clear.
Would it be tough to, because I always say, well, most people, you know, working Monday and the holidays are mostly on Monday. But do we know what odd schedules people have? Are there people say they only work on Thursday and Friday, or any weird schedules like that?
I'm not aware of any qualified part-time employee whose schedule does not include Monday, but I don't know all of the library employees' schedules. So I don't know if you happen to know that, but we can certainly find that out. And you know, Corinne's been, I mean, she totally gets the current policy and it makes sense to her as so. But we would specifically make sure that invitation is received by all of the employees who fall into that category.
Okay. Well, they might, you know, they might not be. They might be very low hour part-time employees that.
Well, they'd have to be above 20 to meet the threshold.
That's what I mean,
Right.
the ones that say only work on Thursdays or something would qualify anyway.
Right.
In fact, really, I guess in order to be a qualified part-time employee, almost by definition, you'd have to work 3 days or more. It's unlikely there's anybody who.
That's right. Okay, so we'll include that for the 30th and we'll send out a note this week, letting people know that'll be an agenda item.
You want to give us your updates?
Yeah, so the next update, the Salted Sailors, you're aware that the bids are due this Friday at 1. The sub bids were due this past week. And the indications are that it is trending above budget is the sense that we're getting. So we'll wait and see what the results show and then we'll talk about what to do about that.
So why was this particular email in the packet?
Oh, just because I just dropped it in as it's just expediency. That's no, just
All right.
it's all information you already knew. So just so there's something in there. The next topic, so we do next Tuesday at the planning board meeting, Shelley Gehring of the Mass Housing Partnership will meet with the board. I think it's going to be really good. I'd spent some time on the phone with her, and Leah and I have a Zoom meeting with her later this week to help her with the background of West Newbury specifically. But she's very knowledgeable. I think she's their senior project manager, but she's got a really good manner. I think she understands exactly what we were trying to get done with this meeting, which is basically, what can a trust do? Where have they been successful in other small towns, and what are some of the considerations on setting up a trust in a way that gets it on a successful path. So I think that'll be a really informative meeting. And if you follow, one of these links in particular has got a workshop they did pretty recently on these very topics. So I think this will help in getting everybody kind of up the learning curve of what a trust is and why we might want to consider it here.
So Angus, that's next Monday at 8:30 p.m.
Next Tuesday. Yep.
Okay, it says August 17th. Isn't today the 10th?
No, it's the 9th.
Oh.
It might be the 10th where you are, but it's the 9th here.
Okay.
Oh, no, he's all messed
You
up.
really went on.
Apparently, when I updated my watch, when I reset the time, my watch, I must have screwed up and reset the date. That's what happens when you go 3 time zones, Thanks for clarifying.
Sure.
Okay, so next.
So I'll be on vacation next week, starting next. We leave for the Cape this weekend, so I think in my contract or in the legislation, it might say that I need permission to be away for more than 2 days.
An hour.
So I just wanted to. I know you guys have known I'm leaving, but I wanted to just proactively make sure that was
Are you looking for a vote?
I wouldn't turn it down, but I
move that we approve.
whatever you vote, so.
Yeah, you're going no matter what, but I move that we approve Angus being on vacation from August 16th to the 20th.
Second.
All in favor?
Thank you.
All right, Angus, can you just explain a little bit though, in your absence, who, if we have questions, what is the best path for board members if we do have questions too?
I would say contact Jenny, and then in all likelihood, she'll engage Stephanie. You can always contact Stephanie directly as well, but you know, from a day-to-day, you know, Jenny's kind of you know, got a lot of visibility of the things I'm working on, but hopefully nothing will come up. But in last job, actually, if I was going to be gone for a week, this council absolutely would have appointed an acting town manager. And I do think that, you know, that's something we ought to look at in the future once our staffing kind of stabilizes and we figure out all of that. But part of that was because in my last job, there were things I could do that nobody else could do. And so that needed to happen because, you know, but here, there, you know, I don't have the same authority that I had up there. So it hasn't been as pressing an issue here. But, you know, it is something we could look at in the future. And we have, for instance, like in the past, you know, as you'll recall, especially, you know, Archie and Rick from about a year ago with COVID, you know, it got to the point where we were so drowning, we just couldn't keep up. And so I had asked the board to designate a member to sign the AP warrants. And that went on for 4 or 5, 6 weeks just to give me that extra couple of hours because we were just, it was that busy. So there are times that something like that, you know, can become helpful.
Okay.
So.
Hey, Angus, before you go on to the next one, just back to item O, there's a Zoom meeting. There'll be Zoom credentials for, that's a regular planning board meeting. So there will be Zoom credentials for that, correct?
Yeah, and they are actually all already available if you follow the link, but we didn't want to post them plainly on the, there's a link to them on this announcement.
Okay.
But we haven't been broadcasting those as widely since we got Zoom bombs that time.
Okay, great.
So then under other active projects, I sent around a list earlier this afternoon. You probably haven't had a time to look at it, but I did want to just highlight a couple of things that have been going on, but not so much on the agenda. One is, you'll recall that there was discussion last winter about wanting to get pedestrian and specifically equestrian activated signals, you know, the pedestrian crossing from Pipestave to Page. The problem is you can't get those installed on a non-compliant crosswalk. And so that triggered the need for really what we've now initiated, which is a safety audit of that intersection. And so we got an earmark in the state budget, and actually earlier today, I've been corresponding with this office. I got the contract today, I signed it, sent it back to them. So once we have an executed contract, which it sounds like could be this week, we'll have those funds that we can now go forward and, you know, engage an engineering firm, traffic engineering firm, to do that safety audit. And we do expect that will lead to recommendations for physical changes to that crosswalk and perhaps the roadway geometry with different of the driveways. So
Just that one location.
yeah, just the one. Yeah, correct. So that's going forward. And once we know more about that, you know, we'll let people know, because we know there's a lot of groups that are going to want to be involved with that discussion. Just some housekeeping things. We're looking to, you know, standardize how we receive information on new developments and infrastructure so that we can get that built into the GIS more expeditiously. Christian's been doing a great job, very proactive on helping to ferret out different issues with GIS and make sure that updates get made timely. I think he's much more, he's very hands-on with that, which is great. And also I've gotten him signed up for this ICMA Cybersecurity Leadership Academy. And it's pretty costly, but I think it'll be worth it for the
Always
town.
worth it.
Yeah, I think it'll be worth it. And it's a good example of him kind of doing work that's kind of a direct outgrowth of the, finance administration that honestly I would love to do myself, but I knew I wouldn't have time. And so it's great that he'll do it. And so he's going to report back to my office and my staff. And then depending on how things go, I told him that I'd probably, want to have him attend a future public meeting once he's got his head around things to kind of share what he's learned. So I think that'll be good. Then, other than that, I mean, there's a long list. Obviously, hiring and integrating the staff that we have hired has been a huge focus for the last 6 or 8 weeks, and I think will continue to be for some time to come with a new clerk, new assistant clerk, new legal, and kind of incorporating that into our workflow.
So is there any kind of election this November?
No,
Zero.
none.
Okay.
Yeah, that was part of Mike's. I don't know if it was part of his rationale, but it was definitely part of why he described his timing of retiring was as good a time as it could possibly be, given that the next election is until May. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot on here. Happy to answer any questions on things, but there are things like the learning tree lease that we had it done, but then it changed. And so I have to go back and redraft it. It's 20 minutes of work, maybe 30, but when I look at what's on my list every morning, how do I justify spending 30 minutes on that issue? Like that's my day. Every day there's things on there that aren't in and of themselves that daunting. They're just not as pressing as other things, or, like this today, a couple of meetings on the fire at the schools. Every day there's fires and things, so literal or figurative, but.
Yeah, it's a long list, Angus.
Yeah, it's, getting the new staff on board will be helpful. I think having that town clerk's office fully staffed is going to help, certainly with some of my office's workload. And the new assistant begins Monday, and Jenny's going to definitely spend some time with her next week on transferring over some of the, website maintenance and some of those things that will hopefully provide an almost immediate, help to our office in terms of workload. But
yeah,
there's still going to be a mismatch because there's just too much to do.
Yeah, but definitely, Angus, I mean, just what I've seen the last 2 years, the structures and the systems, are coming together, and that's great. That's, they're definitely, things are definitely getting moved in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, if not for, COVID, we might be all caught up by now. But obviously, the last year and a half and all that is that threw everyone for a loop.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's things that you do and they come back around, the soldiers and sailors, like we've done all this work and all this bidding, and now who knows, maybe they come in under budget and we're all happy and we go forward. But if not, it's almost like you're not back to square one, but you're kind of like 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
So I have one question for a future meeting.
Yeah.
How has the getting on in construction, how has the new school affected Sam's workload? Are we getting, is the town getting its money out of the district, or do you think things are equitable? I guess that's the question.
So I met this morning for probably about 45 minutes with Sam and with Mike Dwyer, and Sam said for the first 18 months of construction, it has been very smooth. It's been very well run. He's over there several times a week. But it's not been.
Money.
No, it hasn't been. But I think that so here's a good example. I mentioned that with a fire, they had, secured the the location, they kind of,
The site.
the site. So there was a police detail there, and I think it might have been overnight last night. I think they might have had someone overnight. But certainly they had someone all day today. And so I told Mike Dwyer, because Mike had said, oh, we'll absorb that. I said, no. We'll document that cost and make sure we get reimbursed for that, because that's exactly the kind of direct out-of-pocket expense that under that agreement that we spent, it took probably a good year to get that agreement in place. And we want to make sure that we, take advantage of that. So, but that's the first expense I've been made aware of that was a direct out-of-pocket expense, is that police detail for the fire.
Okay, so we haven't had to, and well, consultants for certain highly technical things that we haven't had to hire.
Well, we did, but that was all paid out of the escrow, because there were two different buckets. There was the money that was funded for the third-party reviews, and then the second was the contingency, where if we document expenses above payroll, hours above payroll, that can get reimbursed. But those third-party inspections, that's worked well.
Okay.
Where that's been paid directly by funds that we were given.
You folks on the East Coast must be getting tired.
Yes.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thanks, Rick.
Have a good time, Rick.
Thank you. See you all in 3 weeks.